It's time. Let's see. Oh, is it gonna work? Is it gonna work? Here we go. So, let's see. Reading rainbow. We have neither Asian nor American, the creolization of Asian American rhetoric. Why can I not highlight this? Highlight. Highlight, you motherfucker. There we go. Highlighting. We changed the highlight color. No, that's just like actually highlighting something. I wish you could change the highlight color. I mean, there's probably something like a browser extension that I could download to do that, but like my nose is itchy. There's cat hair in my nose. But that sounds like way too much fucking work just to change the highlight color from blue to something else. Anyway, we're gonna, you know what? I'm gonna keep this in front of me, and we're gonna keep working on the puzzles. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if puzzle is gonna. It's a little bit of the wrong size. Maybe I can fix it. I'll fix it. There we go. And we can make this a little bit bigger. There's a lot of like blank space now, but that's it's okay. I think it's gonna be okay. Look. Oh no, it just makes it shorter. Okay. So save that, and let's get reading.
The emergence of Asian American rhetoric as an area of study remains one of contestation and collaboration. In this era of individual rights and uncivic discourse, scholarship that focuses on the rhetorical practices of a specific community shaped by experiences such as racism, linguistic discrimination, anti-immigrant policies, or even the denial of U.S. citizenship is contested, even dismissed, for its seeming inability to contribute to colorblind truth and knowledge. However, understood as part of a collaboration among the range of American, even global, communities, a theory of Asian American rhetoric can contribute.
Hold on. In this era of individual rights and uncivic discourse. Uncivic discourse. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. I want to know. Oh, I never paused the thing. Let's look it up. Uncivic discourse. Did they say discourse? Yeah. Uncivic. The uncivic culture. Okay. So I'm getting a bunch of like scholarly articles from this. There's no like quick definition. Um there's uncivil discourse. Language characterized as containing direct insults. But this is uncivic. Huh. There's civility. Okay, so I don't know what that means. I'm gonna highlight that because I don't know what that means. And I'm hoping that at some point it might either be defined for me or that we can find like some kind of context clue to tell us what that means. So emergence of Asian American rhetoric as an area of study remains one of contestation and collaboration. So people are both contesting about its value and collaborating to create it and promote it. Okay. So in this era of individual rights and uncivic discourse, we have contestation and collaboration, and we have individual rights and uncivic discourse. So I'm thinking that the contestation and collaboration has something to do with individual rights and uncivic discourse. I don't know. Why are we going with green today? I guess today is a green day. Today is a green day. It's not very fall though. Scholarship that focuses on the rhetorical practices of a specific community shaped by experiences such as racism, linguistic discrimination, anti-immigrant policies, or even the denial of U.S. citizenship is contested, even dismissed, for its seeming inability to contribute to colorblind truth and knowledge. So colorblind, I'm assuming we're talking about colorblind, like, I don't see race, those people. Colorblind, the colorblind racism type people, or whatever. I don't see race, so I can't possibly be racist, which, not how any of this works. But anyway, so the inability to contribute to colorblind truth and knowledge. However, understood as part of a collaboration among the range of American, even global communities, the theory of Asian American rhetoric can contribute to understanding how a people, like a group of people, is both producer of and produced by rhetoric. So rhetoric is what you're trying to say, right? And then rhetoric is how you say it. So you choose the rhetoric you use, how you say the thing, right? I'm getting bogged down. I'm getting lost in the definition that I'm trying to do. Okay, Bubba, you don't have to go nowhere. But anyway, rhetoric is how I choose to say what I'm trying to say based on the audience that I'm speaking to. So the rhetoric I choose in the Twitch chat is going to be a lot different than the rhetoric I choose in the classroom. In the Twitch chat, I'm going to be like, fuck this, it's stupid and I hate it. In the classroom, I'm going to be like, I don't really like this because reasons. And I'm probably going to, point to the article and I'm going to say this reason and that reason and those other reasons. I have evidence and points, but in the Twitch chat, I'm just going to be like, fuck this shit. And other people are going to be like, yeah, fuck this shit too. I mean, I might go into the classroom and be like, fuck this shit, but you get more variable in response. Anyway, so a theory of Asian American rhetoric can contribute to understanding how a people is both producer of and produced by rhetoric. So we, as a society, create rhetoric, but the rhetoric that we consume also creates us. So a person who watches Twitch and is involved in a Twitch community is going to be, a little bit different than a person who doesn't. Namely, in the fact that we say poggers. Okay. Let's keep going.
Communities, a theory of Asian American rhetoric can contribute to understanding how a people is both producer of and produced by rhetoric. In this chapter, I will reflect on the development of Asian American rhetoric and look toward the connections that may be made with existing rhetorical traditions and emerging rhetorical theory. In this sense, Asian American rhetoric might be understood as a Creole discourse, informed by diverse and multiple rhetorical theories and practices, but situated in the exigencies of protest or resistance required in a moment of crisis and moving toward the sustained and stable critique of injury to Asian Americans. To illustrate, I'll turn to two examples of Asian American rhetoric and discuss its development and function as a Creole discourse. Spaces for rhetoric. This chapter is one component of a larger project that examines the possibility of Asian American rhetorical space. While my thinking has been informed by recent composition and rhetoric scholarship that takes up the spatial turn, recalling work by people such as Ralph Cintrone, Jeff Gravel, Nan Johnson, Richard Marbach, and Nedra Reynolds, I have relied on Mountford's 2001 definition of rhetorical space as the geography of a communicative event that may include both literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classrooms. Copyright 2060 Morris Young. The cultural and material.
So, may include both the cultural and material arrangement.
Material arrangement, whether intended or fortuitous, of space, p. 41. In particular, Mountford's suggestion that rhetorical spaces carry the residue of history upon them, but perhaps something else, a physical representation of relationships and ideas.
Ooh. Rhetorical spaces carry the residue of history upon them. This is something I'm going to bring up a lot, probably. We don't exist in a vacuum. The things that we experience, the things that we create, are informed by everything that has ever existed around us. We are only, what is it, like 6 degrees of separation from like Kevin Bacon? Okay, well, if you're only 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, just think about how few degrees of separation you are from everyone in the whole entire world. Okay? Residue of history. We carry the residue of history upon us. I love that. That is like the residue of history upon us. That's beautiful.
Ideas, p42, is especially useful for people whose histories are often unfamiliar or even unknown, as is often the case with Asian Americans. When describing Asian American rhetoric previously, I have suggested that this rhetoric is generated within and from the specific spaces that Asian Americans inhabit, acknowledging and reflecting their identities without being essentialist, and acknowledging and responding to the particular conditions, the actions within their specific places in which they find themselves. Young, 2011. Thus Asian American rhetorical space may be illustrated in specific material sites, and Asian American rhetoric is generated within these material sites to respond to specific occasions. For example, while the Japanese American internment camps of World War II held Japanese and Japanese Americans as threats to the nation without any other evidence than their race, these internees produced petitions and letters protesting their condition and composed tanka poetry expressing their frustration. I have also argued that spatial metaphors are especially important in Asian American rhetoric as Asian Americans address travel and mobility, containment and community, and imagined or real geographies. Young, 2011. For example, the discursively constructed Asiatic BART zone of the early 20th century acted both metaphorically and materially because it generated constituent acts and practices that
Asiatic Bard Zone. What does that mean? Immigrant Act of 1917. A United States act that aimed to restrict immigration by imposing literacy tests on immigrants, creating new categories of inadmissible persons, and barring immigration from the Asia Pacific zone. Okay.
that, on the one hand, reinforced yellow peril discourse by constructing Asians as foreign others and materially
I'm going to highlight that.
excluding Asians from immigration to the United States and naturalization as U.S. citizens, and, on the other hand, the Asiatic BART zone provided an opportunity for Asians to enter the United States national discourse as they addressed these bars placed against them through legal challenges that ultimately were arbitrated in the U.S. Supreme Court. Given these conditions, we might consider the rhetoric produced in these spaces as indigenous or vernacular, the native rhetoric of an emerging or transforming people, neither simply Asian nor considered fully American.
So we've been using, or not we, the texts that we are reading, these are all chapters from the same book, have been using indigenous in a really interesting way that I am not like entirely understanding. Given these conditions, we might consider the rhetoric produced in these spaces as indigenous or vernacular, the native rhetoric of an emerging or transforming people, neither simply Asian nor considered fully American. Okay, so we're using indigenous as something new. I think that's what's happening here. Indigenous means, for this context, indigenous. For the context of this text, indigenous means new. Okay, what does I never looked this up, but like, what does indigenous actually mean? You know, because we have indigenous people, right? Originating or occurring naturally in a particular place, native. Okay, so I think we're using it more in the like originating or occurring. So originating or vernacular. So vernacular, copy, paste and go. Vernacular is the language or dialect spoken by the ordinary people in a particular country or region. We're creating new spaces. We have conflicts, and they're creating new spaces. Okay.
American, who when finding themselves in a new locale must develop tactics for communication and expression in order to respond to the strategic and hegemonic forces of language.
And I don't necessarily mean conflicts like people are fighting. I mean conflicts like, you just, not, you know, it's not an agreement. It's not the same. Different things are coming together, and they're different, and they're making something new. I mean, there are also, actually, there is also like actual conflict, but there's like fighting in court and all those things like we're talking about. The U.S. Supreme Court, right? Legal challenges, right? There's also that. But there's also just like things are not the same, so we make something new.
Language is already in place.
But if this text also seems to be attaching that, conflict to a history of resistance. So both and. They are both created out of conflict that is not necessarily a conflict, but it's also created out of particular conflict. Particular vernaculars, particular indigenous spaces are created from conflict.
However, to understand an indigenous rhetoric in this sense is fraught with problems and politics, since this confuses indigeneity and colonialism, erases natives, and extols settlers.
To understand an indigenous rhetoric in this sense is fraught with problems and politics since it confuses indigeneity and colonialism, erases natives, and extols settlers. We're gonna highlight that because I think that is my like why are we using indigenous here? It seems kind of weird. It seems kind of like an interesting phrasing because I think indigenous really means a very particular thing. In the indigenous people, right? Of America. And so, or, Canada or wherever you are. I mean, we're talking about specifically America here, okay? But anyway, let's keep going.
Settlers. Instead, we can see these rhetorical spaces as sites where pidgin or emergent cultures interact with and resist dominant culture, often creating new rhetorical practices to express new or Creole cultural identities. In the context of Asian American rhetoric, Mao, 2005, has described these spaces as rhetorical borderlands where Asian American, or, in his argument, Chinese American, rhetoric because of its hybridity remains an ongoing representation and negotiation of both traditions, of their complex interrelationships, that seeks not uniqueness qua coherence from within, but complexity and complementarity from both within and without. P. 433. I want to suggest that literacy as translingual practice, between community. Copyright 2000, neither Asian nor American 61. We think of Asian American rhetoric as a Creole discourse, a practice that is not simply a rudimentary or novel expression due to necessity for immediate communication, but rather a native, systematic, and effective use by Asian Americans of symbolic resources, which may indeed be multilingual, in social, cultural, and political contexts. Mao and Young, 2008a, p. 3. While the work in Representations, Doing Asian American Rhetoric, Mao and Young, 2008b, has described what Asian American rhetoric might look or act like, I think it is less important to identify or even reproduce formal features or practices that might be more akin to a grammar. In some ways, an expectation of formal properties becomes limiting, installing generic or strategic practices that structure communication rather than creating the conditions for efficacious, and sometimes improvised, action. Thus, while there is always a need to understand how language is being used as an oppositional discourse, as a means of maintaining ideological positions, or simply an expression of cultural identification, I want to suggest that place, history, and experience create the exigency and exigency that crosses time and space for an Asian American rhetorical act. Writing and walls.
Hold on. Always the need to understand how language is being used as an oppositional discourse, as a means of maintaining ideological positions, or simply as an expression of cultural identification. I want to suggest that place, history, and experience create the exigency, an exigency that crosses time and space for an Asian American rhetorical act. So they create the exigency. Exigency is purpose. So this history of resistance was created purposefully. The rhetorical acts were created specifically because of an exigency. Okay. Maybe?
I
Maybe.
think it is less important to identify
Okay.
Genki that crosses time and space for an Asian writing and walls, spatial and material. To illustrate how place, history, and experience create an exigency, I'd like to examine 2 examples where Asian Americans or Asians in U.S. contexts have developed and performed rhetorical work. First, I will discuss the early 20th century immigration center, Angel Island, and the poems composed there by Chinese immigrants waiting to enter the United States. Then I will...
Oh boy. That, oh boy. She really fucked
consider
that one,
Japanese
didn't
immigrants to
she?
Hawaii who, facing difficult labor and social conditions on the plantations, created and sang field songs, Hole Bushi, critiquing their field bosses literally under their watch. Angel Island served as the immigration detention center primarily for immigrant Chinese between 1910 and 1940. Situated in San Francisco Bay, Angel Island in some cases has been constructed as analogous to Ellis Island in New York Harbor. However, while Ellis Island is often romanticized as the gateway for European immigration, where many entered under the watchful gaze of the Statue of Liberty, Angel Island has not captured the American imagination nor been part of the grand narrative of immigration in the same way. The dreams of the Gold Mountain for many Chinese immigrants never materialized, as those who successfully made it to the mainland often found poor-paying, hard labor jobs, while others remained detained only to be returned to China. The need for Angel Island was created in part by the passage of the Chinese...
I just want to think of the name Angel Island. That's such a that's a hell of a name, you know.
Exclusion Act of 1882 and subsequent legislation that severely restricted Chinese immigration. Chinese who had satisfactory documentation papers that allowed them to leave.
Like you think, you know, these islands are like for to facilitate immigration, but rather they're actually to prevent immigration, because you don't need an immigration center where people go to immigrate if you can just go there, right? You don't need that. If anybody can get in, then anybody just goes in, right? So Angel Island is, you know, it is itself a that name is itself a rhetorical choice. You know, we are, you know, doing the work of the angels by allowing certain people to come into the country, but not others. You know, that's definitely a rhetorical choice. And it is a stinky one.
Leave and return to the United States were allowed to proceed to the mainland. Others who were seeking entry to the United States for the first time were subject to medical exams, hearings to review their applications, and interrogation too. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagarat,
Yeah,
copyright
okay.
62 Morris Young. Number
Oh.
23 determine their identities. The material space of Angel Island functions to contain these Chinese immigrants. While not prisoners, the Chinese certainly faced many restrictions. Men and women were separated, even if they were husband and wife. Young children were left with their mothers. They could not have visitors from the mainland before their cases had been decided. The immigrants usually spent their time in their dormitories having access to separate small, fenced, outdoor recreation yards. Lai, Lim, and Young, 1991, p. 15, Lee and Young, 2010, pages 95 to 102. However, while this material space acted to hold the Chinese in turn used this material to literally and metaphorically write their narratives of resistance into the walls that contained them. Written in Chinese characters, the poems were composed in pencil or ink, and sometimes even carved into the wooden walls. The delivery of these poems raises interesting questions, since they existed in public under the watch of the authorities and yet were available only to those who could read the characters, providing a public critique to a specific audience of fellow detainees. Though the people who wrote these poems were immigrants and arriving in America for the first time, they locate themselves in America, perhaps not as Americans, but certainly not as outsiders. Their detainment on Angel Island is a historical moment that creates an exigency for subsequent Asian American rhetorical production, developing topoi concerning immigration, the racialized body, social, justice, and political engagement. In the following examples from Island, Poetry and History of Chinese Immigrants on Angel Island, 1910 to 1940, Lai et al., 1991, there are explicit references to containment, to the fact that these people are being restricted to the island, to their barracks. There is a spatial awareness in these poems, seeing space both in its material and metaphorical senses, and that this space prevents these Chinese immigrants from attaining their dreams of wealth and success in the Gold Mountain. Number 23 This place is called an island of immortals, when, in fact, this mountain wilderness is a prison. Once you see the open net, why throw yourself in? It is only because of empty pockets I can do nothing else. Number 24. I, a 7-foot man, am ashamed I cannot extend myself. Curled up in an enclosure, my movements are dictated by others. Enduring 100 humiliations, I can only cry in vain. This person's tears fall, but what can the blue heavens do? Number 25. I have infinite feelings that the ocean has changed into a mulberry grove. My body is detained in this building. Literacy as translingual practice. Neither Asian nor American. 63. I cannot fly from this grassy hill, and green waters block the hero. Impetuously, I threw away my writing brush. My efforts have all been in vain. It is up to me to answer carefully. I have no words to murmur against the east wind. The narrative of these poems, but of many in the collection as well, position the writers not as outsiders coming to America with lofty dreams, nor as grateful newcomers unwilling to critique America. Rather, the narratives position the writers in relation to America. They comment, criticize, even challenge America as active participants in America, even if limited by the boundaries of Angel Island. But I would also like to make the point that these writers are also participating in a type of cultural transformation as they write about America in their own Chinese dialect and poetic forms. Such an act is subtle, and even subversive, as the poems were written on the walls for other detainees to see. The meta-awareness of these poems and of the function of these poems illustrates the power of this particular rhetorical space. Number 31. There are tens of thousands of poems composed on these walls. They are all cries of complaint and sadness. The day I am rid of this prison and attain success, I must remember that this chapter once existed. In my daily needs, I must be frugal. Needless extravagance leads youth to ruin. All my compatriots should please be mindful. Once you have some small gains, return home early. In the situation of Angel Island we see how place, history, and experience create the conditions for and shape the rhetorical acts of the immigrants who found themselves detained there. We also see in these poems examples of hybrid.
I'm just like, poetry is kind of my shit, and I'm just like, I really want to like do some like serious poetry stuff, but at the same time I'm like, we gotta focus on the article. Maybe we come back to them later. Maybe we come back to them later. Okay, it's okay.
Hybridity and, perhaps, nascent creolization, the development of a new discourse to respond to a particular exigency in Angel Island, but also an exigency that crosses time and space as we take the broader view of history and understand the experience of Asians and Asian Americans in the United States. The immigrants described here are neither Asian nor American but caught in a liminal space, manifested by Angel Island, where they must reimagine and reposition themselves in order to
neither Asian nor American, but caught in a liminal space. That's a word I have heard a lot recently. What is liminal? Relating to a transitional or an initial stage of a process, occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or threshold. So like the way that I've been hearing liminal defined as is like a place where everybody has been. And I think everybody has been in a state of transition or in a state where you're like in the initial stage of a process. More definitions? Nothing. What is a liminal? What are examples of liminality? Rites of passage, places of exile, stairways, hallways, and elevators. So why is a stairway, a hallway, and an elevator an example of a liminal space? Because it's a place you're in a room and then you transition to another room, and stairwell or the hallway that gets you there. Break rooms, transitioning from one part of the workday to the other part of the workday. The break between the different parts of the workday. Airports. Okay, so this is why when I was talking or when I was hearing about the liminal spaces, it was like places where everyone has been, because these are places where like lots of people have been, right? At the same time, that's not really the core of liminality. The core of liminality is to be in transition. So, translingual in transition. We are translingualing life now. We're transing life. I mean, life was already trans to begin with. But but caught in a liminal space, so a place of transition. So you're not here, but you're not there. You are somewhere in between. Okay.
To act and to draw on the variety of symbolic resources, newly acquired or already available, to respond rhetorically. Whole Bushi as Asian
And the thing is, like, you don't really live in a liminal space. You don't really exist in a liminal space. So it's like, how do you adjust to this, to living in a state of transition? You know? So you have to reimagine and reposition themselves in order to act and draw on the variety of symbolic resources newly acquired or are already available to respond rhetorically. Okay.
American rhetoric. As a site of Asian American and Pacific Islander rhetoric, Hawaii has had to deal with the ongoing representation and negotiation of many traditions that, through historical, social, and cultural forces, have had profound material effects on that. Literacy as translingual practice, between Copyright 2013, 64 Morris Young. Place. Thus, while Hawaii has often been invoked as a metaphorical paradise for its pure natives and unspoiled natural landscape in the 19th century, or for its multicultural harmony in the 20th century, it more often functions as a hybrid or Creole space in what Wilson, 2000, has described as the dirty, magical Pacific, p. 283, where cultures from across the Pacific and Asia have conflicted and collaborated under the U.S. metropole and have not fulfilled the American master tropes of the melting pot or James Michener's golden man, sick.
What is that? Where'd it go? Oh, shit, where'd it go? James Michener's Golden Man. Highlight that. We're going to copy it. I wonder. Here. Copy. New tab. Paste. Oh, look at that. Look at that. American writer, more than 40 books, most of which were long. No, I don't want to. Maybe later. Fuck you. Fictional family sagas covering the lives of many generations in particular geographic locales and incorporating detailed history. Made his work for bestsellers. Okay, why? Why? This is why I use Google. This is why I use Google. I'm sorry, but like, come on. Or no, yeah, Google. I use Firefox, but I use Google. Fantasy of Hawaii. That's a whole ass PDF. Jesus Christ, that's a whole ass PDF. Okay, let's see. Plot. We do not need to. How do you search? I know you can like search for words on the page. How the heck do you do that? Find in page. Golden Man. Oh, here we go. Chapter 6. The Golden Man summarizes the changes in Hawaiian culture and economics based on the intermarriages of various groups on the islands. So I'm going to say that Golden Man is about assimilation. The Melting Pot, which is about assimilation, or The Golden Man, which is probably also about assimilation. I mean, I should have seen Melting Pot and just been like, oh yeah, assimilation. But I didn't. Sometimes it takes a bit. Okay.
The rise of the sugar plantation in Hawaii in the mid-19th century dramatically changed the makeup of Hawaii's population. By 1920, over 300,000 Asians, from China, Korea, Okinawa, the Philippines, and, above all, Japan, came to Hawaii to work on the plantations, transforming a population that had been 97% native Hawaiian /
Can we just stop for a minute and like just think about the fact that she doesn't know how to say Hawaii? The Google screen reader does not know how to read the word, or not Google. What is this? Microsoft. This is Microsoft. The Microsoft screen reader does not know how to read Hawaii. I'm pretty sure That let's look it up. Let's look it up. Is Microsoft an American company? An American multinational technology corporation which produces computer software. Okay, yeah, so they speak English. They're American. They speak American English, you know? American English. So why do the people who program this screen reader not program her to be able to read a state in America?
Part Hawaiian and
I don't know.
2% white in 1853
I mean,
to a
I know.
population that was 62% Asian, 16.3% Native Hawaiian / part Hawaiian, and 7.7% white in 1920, Takeke, 1998, p. 132. In 2010, the population of Hawaii continued to reflect the impact of the plantation era with a makeup that is 38.6% Asian, 10% Native Hawaiian / Pacific Islander, and 24.7% white, United States Census Bureau, 2010. While many of these contract laborers imagined that their time in Hawaii would be limited as they earned their fortunes and returned home rich, this did not turn out to be the case. In fact, the economics of the plantation often kept these laborers not only in Hawaii unable to return their homelands, but literally on the plantation, as workers lived in plantation camps, were forced to buy all of their necessities at the plantation store, and could never earn enough in a reason.
With the plantation coupons? With the plantation coupons, right? You know, the plantation store, you shop at the plantation store, the plantation coupons.
Reasonable amount of time to improve their conditions and move off the plantation.
There were company towns, and company towns basically did not, they paid their some of the company towns paid their workers in company coupons that were only valid at the company store. And they would, hike the prices to keep the people who they were, employing locked in to that particular town. So that is not legal anymore, I believe. I think we have labor laws that say you have to pay your employees in money instead of coupons, but there are certain, corporations out there that are the gig corporations that are trying to, I think Amazon pays you in Amazon stock. I think that some Amazon employees get like bonuses or something. Maybe not even bonuses. Like it's part of their package that they get Amazon stock. Like that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem.
Plantation. As Okihiro, 1991.
I want to explain like why that is a problem. Okay, if your employee is working at your company and you pay them in stock, that payment, that form of compensation, is only valuable so long as your business stays in business. Right? That means that your employee now has an invested interest, not only in like making sure that your company stays in business, right? But also what? Shit. It was there and then I lost it. Basically, you're blackmailing your employees to like your company. That's the point there. It's fucked up. You should not do that. Like you're paying them in gum, but you're also forcing them to like being paid in gum because otherwise they would starve. I mean, or their teeth would fall out. That was I don't know.
Points out in his historical study, Cane Fires, the plantations exerted their will over their workers through legislation, Masters and Servants Act, labor contracts, the courts and police, plantation rules, a system of...
Cane Fires, the plantations exerted their will over their workers through legislation, Masters and Servants Act. What is that? Anytime I find out about an old, a piece of legislation, I'm just like, what does that mean? Designed to regulate relations between employers and employees during the 18th and 19th centuries. That's from the UK. I don't want to hear about the UK. I'm from America. Let's see. Use in Britain, use in Australia. That's sussy. Let's see. That's very sussy. Why is the U.S. not mentioned here? Why is the U.S. not mentioned here? Oh, here we go. Here we go. This particular act greatly influenced industrial relations and employment law in the United States, Australia. There's nothing mentioned there. There's nothing mentioned there. There's like nothing. It's just that line. This particular act greatly influenced industrial relations and employment law in the United States, comma, Australia and 1845 Act, Canada, 1847, New Zealand, 1856, and South Africa, 1856. What? 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 um where we just gonna ignore, the US? Let's see. I'm looking at the references now. Here, you know what we should do? Here, let's see. We're gonna change to that. Can you see it now? There. Can't really see it. You can't see it at all. Okay. Change to full screen. No, not full screen, just entire screen. There we go. There we go. There we go. It's not there. It's not. I'm looking at the references and I'm not seeing anything for the US. And I'm like, this is UK. Hmm. It's kind of funny that, it's not Rated Eaton Act. It's UK. Kind of funny that it's kind of funny that that's not, that's not there. And like, sure, I could do a little bit more. I could do a little bit more to look that up, but I'm just gonna leave that there because I think that says a lot more than I could ever say, myself. Shit. I hope you could see that. Anyway, Reading Rainbow. We're back.
System of punishment and fines, physical abuse, and fear, p35. In short, the plantations were able to utilize not only their own systems of ordering and discipline, but also to employ and manipulate the systems of government and larger culture in the exploitation of workers who were openly discriminated against because of race. As one form of response to plantation culture, Japanese and Japanese American field workers composed and performed whole bushi, cane stripping songs. The production and form of these songs can be considered typically local, with the name itself made up of the Hawaiian whole meaning stripping cane and the Japanese bushi for song. The tunes were often based on Japanese folk melodies, while the lyrics incorporated the new subject matter of Hawaii. We find, then, in these songs perhaps not only some of the first Japanese American verse and literature produced in Hawaii, but also an important Japanese American cultural and rhetoric practice that functions to critique American society. As Okihiro, 1991, argues, whole bushi, nonetheless, like the blues for African Americans, were both looking glass and mirror, clarifying and bearing a minority group's literacy as translingual practice between communities and classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis Group, 2000 and copyright 2013, neither Asian nor American 65. Experiences in America and
I don't know if you could hear that. My neighbor just got home, I guess, and they were making noise. So I muted for a second, and now we're back.
And, in reflection, American society as a whole. Further, the beginnings of whole bushi locate the germination of a people, neither Japanese nor European American, but uniquely indigenous and American, deeply rooted and with green leaves. p33. While these songs serve to critique and to create new relations between an emergent culture and the dominant culture, even if only on the surface, these songs are also rhetorical, the persuasive act of workers who locate themselves and create a space for negotiation and refutation with dominant cultural practices within the specific occasion and space of the plantation and in the larger Creole space of Hawaii. More than merely laments or complaints by workers about their lives, these songs are sharp in their criticism, often referring to specific events or people, but they are also witty and ironic, commenting on the routine of everyday life, the grand dreams they had expected to fulfill in Hawaii, and the material conditions of their existence. For example, 1. Wonderful Hawaii, or so I heard. One look and it seems like hell. The managers, the devil and his lunas are demons. Shall I go to...
What? Wonderful Hawaii, or so I heard. One look and it seems like hell. The manager's the devil and his lunas are demons. Ooh!
To America, or shall I go home to Japan? I'm lost in thoughts here in Hawaii. Starting out so early, lunches on our shoulders, off to our whole work never seems to be enough. My husband cuts the cane, I do the whole. By sweat and tears we get by. Worse than the birds crying or the temple bells tolling is the plantation bell calling us to another day. Today's Hohana work doesn't seem so hard. Literacy as translingual copyright 66 Morris Young. Because last night I received a letter from home.
Oh.
In each of these songs the topoi of the plantation serves to generate specific critiques of plantation culture and practices. There is a clear tension as we hear the workers oppose the plantation or its agents and oppose the system that they are working under, but are tied, or even compelled, to the plantation. The workers sing about their poor treatment and about a hard life made harder by an oppressive plantation. They sing about their personal lives, the impossibility of separating those lives from the plantation, and the ties between their labor and their bodies. However, while the plantation may treat workers simply as bodies, these workers embody their rhetoric as they create and perform their songs in the fields, giving meaning to their labor beyond what is required by the plantation. As Reynolds, 2004, has argued, only bodies can make places meaningful, and the bodies that occupy a place give it meaning. Bodies that are beautiful, bodies that are big, bodies that are slow, bodies that are pregnant, bodies that are tattooed, or corseted, all of these bodies make their way through social space, being imprinted by place as they also leave their trace upon places.
Just like you're not wrong. But I feel like there's a little bit going on inside those bodies, you know?
Places.
I don't know.
Pages 144 to 145. The plantation calls and the workers answer. And yet their answers are quietly subversive and counter-hegemonic, as opposed to simply resist.
Well, hold on. While the plantation may treat workers simply as bodies, these workers embody their rhetoric as they create and perform their songs in the fields, giving meaning to their labor beyond what is required by the plantation. Yeah, this feels weird. This feels like a weird choice. Because, like, okay, bodies are making places meaningful. Plantation treats workers as bodies. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know. It
Resistant,
just,
because of the
it's an
nature of the songs.
interesting.
Sung in the field under the watch of the Luna, overseer, the songs made their criticisms of the plantation literally right in front of plantation officials. Or when the plantation employed Hipari men to work in the fields, songs were sung in conjunction with the plantation as a call and response took place between these special workers hired to work faster and the regular workers who had to keep up. Point 2. An ethos is generated from the whole bushi that is similar to the ethos of the blues described by Neil, 1993. The blues, in Neil's view, are not about resignation, not a lament about a past history, nor a bleak assessment of the future. Rather, the blues are about survival and the creation of lyric responses to the facts of life, p. 56. But, while the blues is often seen as a personal response, both the blues and the whole bushi in fact become important community responses.
So, a lyric response to the facts of life. Blues are about survival and the creation of lyric responses to the facts. Blues is often seen as a personal response. They both become important community responses. thinking of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit right now. Survival, the creation of lyric responses to the facts of life. They become important community responses. So Strange Fruit was not just resignation or a lament. It was a song about resistance. And it's not that the song itself is about resistance, but the act of creation of the song is about resistance. Strange Fruit was not going to be a popular song. It was probably going to be an immensely. It's about lynching in the 20s, 30s. I forget when exactly it was written, but it's around that area of time. I could look it up, I guess, but I don't want to spend too much time on the extraneous. Anyway, so we're talking about this history, and we're well, not weird. Billie Holiday is talking about this not even history, this presently occurring thing that is happening right as she is writing the song. And she is writing this song not just to be sad about it, right? It's also to be like, dude, this is fucked up. What the fuck is going on here? And she's doing it at great personal risk to her career, her popularity, her livelihood itself. So, the blues is a personal response, but it's also important community responses, right? We're not just writing these songs as an act of personal grieving, as an act of personal expression. It's also as a community response. How does the community feel about that? How is the community going to respond? How is the community going to resist?
Responses, and, as Neil suggests, stand for a collective sensibility of a people at particular stages of cultural, social, and political development, p. 59. Thus the themes of labor and oppression that characterize the whole bushi, as well as the blues, are very necessary in the impulse by the workers to respond creatively to their circumstances. In short, these songs are about workers and their bodies.
Very necessary. The themes of labor and oppression are very necessary in the impulse by the workers to respond creatively to their circumstances. Okay, so it's your reality is what you know, and the things you create come out of the reality and what you know. Yeah.
Bodies, how they are driven, how they are disciplined, how they are owned. The following whole bushi makes the point simply: their bodies exist to produce profits. Literacy as translingual practice. Copyright neither Asian nor American 67. Why settle for 35 cents doing whole all day when I can make $1 sleeping with that pake? Thus, like the African American blues, the whole bushi are about a human condition, a condition of racialized bodies, a condition of oppression. And the plantation operates not only to produce profits, but also to reduce persons to bodies. Foucault's 1970.
And also to reduce persons to body. This is the when you bring up the quote earlier, the bodies, bodies transforming spaces. This is reducing persons. So persons, what is a person? What makes you a human, right? What makes you a human? And then what makes you just a body, right? And so plantation reduces profits, but also reduces persons to bodies. So a body, I mean, if you think about it, not like bodies, right? But your body is a tool. And your agency allows you to use your body as a tool to complete a task. But these plantations allow plantation owners who receive the profits, people who own the means of productions, to turn people's bodies into tools. And so rather than treating them as people, we treat them as tools. Not we, but the people who own the means of production. Foucault's 1979 study of the body in 18th century France, Discipline and Punish, provides an important description of the function of the body in oppressive conditions. Ooh. The body now serves as an instrument or intermediary. That's what I just said! I mean, I've read this. I've read this before. Okay. If one intervenes upon it to imprison it or to make it work, it is in order to deprive the individual of liberty that is regarded both as right and proper. The body, according to this penalty, is caught up in a system of constraints and privations, obligations, and prohibitions. Physical pain, the pain of the body itself, is no longer the constituent element of the penalty. From being an art of unbearable sensations, punishment has become an economy of suspended rights. The body is restricted and implemented as a tool. Yeah.
P11. The plantation economy of Hawaii served to deprive the workers of their liberties, especially those of the Japanese who found themselves, along with other imported labor from Asia, among the lowest paid and often the target of overt racism. It was no longer the physical pain alone from grueling work that marked the condition of the Japanese laborers, but the systematic suspension of basic rights as they were subjected to harsh penalties under both plantation rules and territorial laws. And even as the pipeline of cheap labor closed and plantation owners were forced to negotiate with a growing collective labor body, the residual paternalism still maintained control of workers' bodies and how they were used.
The residual paternalism. So we played BioShock Infinite over the summer on the 4th of July. It was a 2-day kind of thing. I was gonna, try to play it all through one day, but it was like 12 hours, so I didn't make it. But in BioShock Infinite, there's basically a factory town. And the workers are stuck in the factory town. There's nowhere else to go. They either get jobs there or they have to go be homeless in the slums, right? And one of the things that is like one of like embedded in the ambiance of the area is that thing where Jeremiah Fink, he comes over the intercom and he's like, why do you guys have to work 7 days a week and 12 hours a day? Because what does he say? Let's go find it online maybe. Let's find some Jeremiah Fink quotes. Okay. This is such a good example of this. Jeremiah Fink propaganda. The most common complaint I hear from the working man is that they are unhappy with their lot. Why torment yourself, I ask? The ox cannot become a lion, and why would you want to? Who wants all those responsibilities and worry? You do your job, you eat your food, you go to sleep. Simplicity is beauty. The residual paternalism. Yeah. Maintained control of the workers' bodies and how they were used. Let's read another one. I wasn't born deaf. Ha ha. I hear what it is people are saying. Why, you say, Mr. Fink? We have to work 16 hours a day. Ha ha ha. Let's be clear. I would like nothing more than to shorten your workday. But the fact is, I simply can't. Why not, you ask? Well, I can sum it up for you in one word. Morality. You see, my friends, the idle hand is the tool of the devil. You take industry from a man's hand, and what goes in its place? Whiskey, women, and dice. And I, for one, will not have that in our friendly little town. No, sir, I will not. Residual paternalism still maintained control of workers' bodies and how they were used. Let's try another one. Lately, I've been hearing a whole mess of funny new ideas. paid vacation, 8-hour days, workers' compensation. These are anarchist words, my friends, and the anarchist is the friend of hunger, the comrade of want, the partner of disease, and I, for one, will be goddamned if I'm going to let an anarchist come between you and your livelihood. Residual paternalism still maintained control of the workers' bodies and how they were used. Do we want to do another one? There's so many of this. It's so, like, Marshak Infinite's portrayal of a factory town is so good. It's so boom, chef's kiss. Anyway, no, it's and like this is this is not just the video games, right? This is like based on on real life, right? These are real things that real people experience. Video games are definitely not political, though. I'm gonna highlight that. I love that. That's juicy. That's fucking juicy. Anyway, let's keep going.
Thus, despite the oppressive conditions of the plantation, these Japanese and Japanese American field workers, among the many diverse field workers who labored hard, found themselves in a productive rhetorical space that allowed them to address the hardships they experienced. And part of this rhetorical space is shaped by the Creole nature of the community that brought together different discourses and created new forms and expressions to address specific conditions. While improvement in material, political, and social conditions were slow and still affect social relations in Hawaii today, we also see the emergence of an Asian American rhetoric that functioned to critique and argue against the plantation. What I hope to have illustrated in this chapter is how both Angel Island and the plantation in Hawaii have functioned as a specific rhetorical space that, as Mount Ford, 2001, has described, is a physical representation of relationships and ideas. In this sense, Angel Island and Hawaii's plantations are both topoi and trope sites, where the topics for inquiry and consideration are generated, and metaphors for literacy as translingual practice, but copyright 68 Morris Young. The experiences and means of persuasion employed by Asians and Asian Americans. However, each is a particular manifestation of the Asian American experience as a Creole rhetorical space, as a place that carries the residue of history. Thus, as the Angel Island poems and the Whole Bushi illustrate, the rhetorical work generated in these Creole rhetorical spaces reflects and negotiates a history and legacy of Asians in America, its transformation of the community, and the ongoing give and take that continues for those whose lives are informed by the Asian American experience. Finally, this examination of two instances of Asian American rhetoric also provides historical context for the study of Asian American rhetorical and literacy practices that have begun to emerge in the field of rhetoric and composition. For example,
hold on. This examination of two instances of Asian American rhetoric also provides historical context for a study of Asian American rhetorical and literacy practices that have begun to emerge in the field of rhetoric and composition. Okay.
Example, Monberg, 2008, has extended Radcliffe's concept of rhetorical listening to uncover the spatial metaphors and other pedagogical theories in the work of Filipino-American
rhetorical listening. I know I've heard that before, but I forget what this means. Let's check it out. Paste it. Go. Rhetorical listening, a trope for interpretive invention. What is rhetorical listening? We engage in rhetorical listening. Rhetorical listening means that we aim to do more than just to win an argument. Instead, rhetorical listening is about listening to understand, comprehend, or what? Or what? Oh, God. Or, in the Platonic sense, like Plato, strive towards truth with a capital T. Oh, boy. Oh. Listening to understand and comprehend. So before we can argue, and this is why I'm not like a big like debate person, before we can argue about things, we need to listen to one another to like understand and comprehend. Listen to what a person is actually is trying to say instead of what you want them to be saying. Yeah? Yeah. In previous week's readings, I think we also had this common thread about the importance of rhetorical listening. It was, I forget what the title was. Let me check in my done folder. Translingual practices between communities, critical ones. These are all from the first week. Why are they in here and not? Or not? Why is last week's, what am I saying? Downloads. Why are last week's here? Between communities. Why are last week's readings not in the done folder? Shit. They're somewhere on my computer. Now I have to go find them. Anyway, the point is, in one of the articles, we learned about, I remember this. We had the concept of, the article starts with the concept that, like, people think that you can't talk to other people unless you speak the same language, right? And then the article goes on to, like, disprove this, right? It's like, actually, no. Because we have this really interesting model where translators, work to help, translate from, a person's, native tongue, whatever tongue they choose to speak, whatever language they choose to speak, and then translate it to another language so that everyone can speak the language they're used to, but in a forum that is actually trying to do things and achieve things. So the processes that they have developed for communication have forced them to speak, not like speak slower, like literally, like speaking very slow, right? But like speaking, like communicate slower, which means they have more. You have to think about what a person is saying. You have to think, not just think through the process of, like, I hear words and I listen to them and I have to figure out what they're saying, which happens almost instantaneously, you know. But you have to, like, translate things, right? And the process of translation, translation isn't always a one-to-one thing. So the process of translation requires you to really think about what a person is saying, what they're trying to say, right? Rather than, when I say consequences, you assume that I mean bad things instead of, there's rewards. Because consequences can be rewards. But we don't usually use them to mean that, right? So I say there's consequences for completing that job, and you think, shit, that there's a problem there. What I really mean is there's rewards. Well, I say, there's consequences for completing that job. I don't know. I'm like I only know, like, enough German to give you directions. So I can't say that in German. But I say that in German, hypothetically speaking. So I could say that in German, and I said that in German, and you'd have to, like, think it through, and you'd be like, how do we translate the particular word they used in place of consequences here? Well, there's a lot of different translations. Do you mean this translation? Do you mean that translation? What translation do you mean, right? It's thinking over the process. There's a lot of assumption that comes from the fact that we both speak the same language. I mean, ostensibly, I'm thinking that somebody who's watching this would, like, speak the same language as me. I don't know. Maybe you don't. Maybe they don't. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I don't know how you understand me, but welcome to the stream. But anyway, so rhetorical listening, involves kind of the assumption that we're saying the same things. We're both speaking English. We're both saying the exact same thing, or speaking different languages, which is kind of the idea of translingualism. So you don't just have to listen for what you recognize, right? You listen for, and I think that's the difficulty there. There's an uncertainty in that, where we kind of have to come to one another, come to the table, come to the conversation, honestly, and with a willingness to listen. That is, and once again, take this back to debates. It's not really present in most debates. Most debates are about, I want to win the debate, and I want you to lose the debate, because I'm right, and you're not right. And I don't think debates are about anything other than that. I mean, there are some people who use debates rhetorically to convince, the people who haven't quite decided yet. And then, like, there are different levels of validity to that. I'm not going to say that that's, like, completely invalid. There's different levels of validity to that. But at the same time, you and the person you're debating are not going to, like, come to some new truth with a capital T by just, yelling at each other about which of you is right. You can piss up a wall as hard as you want to, but like you're still just pissing on the wall. There's just piss everywhere. There's no truth in the piss. There's just piss.
Activist Dorothy Lego Cordova, to challenge the binary between rhetorical theory and practice, and to recover the rhetorical legacy of Cordova as an important site of community memory. Shimabuka Rose, 2008, work has focused on one World War II internment camp in Heart Mountain, Wyoming, to examine how a group of Japanese-American internees in this community collaboratively wrote, published, and distributed bulletins that explicitly refused the military draft as long as the community was still interned against their will. Finally, in her work Huang, 2008, examines the racial...
Wait, they published, and distributed bulletins that explicitly refused the military draft as long as the community was still interned against their will? What? Hold on. Selective Service and Training Act of 1940. The War Relocation Act reinstated the military draft for Japanese Americans. Oh my god! What the fuck? So they're putting people into internment camps, and they're also saying, oh, you also have to go fight for this country. What the fuck? It's like, if you decided that people, and like, okay, people in internment camps did not actually do anything to be put in an internment camp. But it's like, if you went to like a jail and you said, you guys are all going to be drafted to go to war. It's not a one-to-one. It's not a one-to-one. But it's the level of like audacity that like you have the gall to imprison a person, but then ask for them to do something for you. Like, what? Like, you're not citizen enough to like go out into the world and do citizen stuff. But you are citizen enough to go be cannon fodder. Oh boy.
Racialization of language and literacy as applied to the Asian American subject, in particular focusing on the development of ethos and the use of memory by Asian American students to create rhetorical situations that challenge racism. What is exciting about the work of these three scholars and the emerging scholarship in cultural rhetorics is that it crosses historical boundaries, moving from the not-too-distant past to the contemporary, examines the use of rhetoric and writing across genres and purposes, and seeks to understand specifically the relationship between Asian Americans and their use of rhetoric. In these sites of rhetorical activity, we see rhetoric that creates, challenges, and makes space for Asian Americans and helps us to reimagine rhetoric and composition as a field. Notes. 1. The whole Bushi.
Okay, so let's take a last look. The rhetoric that creates challenges and makes spaces for Asian Americans and helps us to reimagine rhetoric and composition as a field. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I really like this one. I like this article. Good shit. This is good shit. I'm such a fucking nerd. I'm like, that was a really good article. Or not an article, I guess. It's a paper. Paper? I don't know. Whatever. I liked it. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. Not just because of the poetry. I mean, you always, anytime you include poetry, I just, you instantly win me over. I love poetry. I love, like, I think people have a lot of, like, anxiety when it comes to, like, analyzing poetry. But I feel like poetry is, like, one of the simplest forms of art to analyze. Because there's just less. But also, the specificity of the words is just, Ooh. It's very good. It's very good. I love poetry. I love poetry. I love talking about poetry. Even if like I don't really enjoy reading it, I just enjoy like analyzing it and like understanding it, picking it apart, seeing what it's really about. And that's why I like music a lot too. Um like and not just like I mean I do like the music because of like the wonderful brain body tingles and like dancing and stuff like that. But also like, musical lyrics, even like the most basic music, most basic lyrics that you can possibly think of, like are probably have something just absolutely fascinating going on in them. Um, you know, it takes a little bit of work to uncover it. Anyway, let's go. So we have confronting the wounds of colonialism through words.
This chapter examines current efforts by indigenous peoples to revitalize their languages and cultures as a part of a process of healing wounds caused by the history of colonialism they have endured. In schools in much of the colonized world, indigenous cultures were devalued and children were punished for practicing them in order to replace them with the cultures of the colonizers. Labeled barbaric and uncivilized based on cursory examinations, indigenous languages and cultures went largely unstudied and unappreciated except by a few linguists and anthropologists who presented nuanced views of indigenous peoples in their writings. Too often, indigenous cultures
By a few linguists and anthropologists.
Cultures were, and are, at best romanticized and at worst described as backward or savage. Today, we can describe colonization to include cultural genocide that has had disastrous effects on the well-being of the colonized. As teacher, school administrator, and Indian agent Neal, 1950, noted, the U.S. government's Indian Bureau went on the assumption that any Indian custom was, per se, objectionable, whereas the customs of whites were the ways of civilization, p4. This systematic attack on indigenous identity along with the expropriation of their lands often destroyed cohesive, functioning tribal societies without an adequate replacement structures, leading to all kinds of social ills today. Too often today the colonized continue to colonize themselves as they copy the thinking they learned in schools controlled by colonial government.
Assimilation. This is what assimilation is.
Governments, as Alexei, 2007, can be accused of doing in his 2007 National Book Award-winning young adult semi-autobiographical novel The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. In the novel Alexei paints an especially bleak picture of life on the Spokane Indian Reservation in the United States, and the main character, Arnold, escapes by enrolling in the white school located off the reservation.
Oh
A
boy.
non-Indian teacher tells Arnold, "That's how we were taught to teach you. We were sup." Literacy as translingual practice, between communities and copyright confronting the wounds of colonialism through words 71. Posed to kill the Indian to save the child.
Oh boy.
We were supposed to make you give up being Indian. Your songs and stories and language and dancing. Everything. We weren't trying to kill Indian people. We were trying to kill Indian culture, p35. Because
Oh
Arnold
boy.
chooses to go to a white school to get a better education, he is labeled an apple, red on the outside and white culturally on the inside, by those he leaves behind. School success is viewed as only obtainable by assimilating into the dominant colonizing culture. Similarly, anthropologist Stockers, 2005, I Won't Stay Indian, I'll Keep Studying, set in Costa Rica, examines a problem shared by indigenous peoples worldwide that the label Indian had connotations of backwardness and even inferior intellect. Being Indian automatically set students up for being treated as inferior, and that for most students from the Indian reservation, projecting an Indian identity seemed incompatible with school success, p2. Alexei's writing is a continuation of an upsurge of indigenous authorship that can be traced back in the United States to at least the civil rights movement. Leading American Indian authors include Pulitzer Prize winner N. Scott Momaday, Vine Deloria, Jr., and, most recently, Alexei. Today, most indigenous authors write in their national rather than tribal languages, because these are the languages they know, and their use opens up their work to a wide readership. Through their writings, indigenous authors seek to understand and explain the indigenous colonial experience, and in doing so they cross the various boundaries, real and imagined, existing between indigenous peoples and the immigrant settler populations they are in contact with. These boundaries reflect the differences in the languages and cultures of the people involved, but they are not hard and fast. Rather, the boundaries are porous, with words and cultural practices seeping back and forth across them. Religious boundaries. The writing systems for many indigenous languages were developed centuries ago by Christian missionaries in order to make religious writings accessible to both potential and actual converts. Missionaries, producing dictionaries and translated Bibles, took indigenous words and concepts and shaded them with Christian theological meanings. These translation efforts crossed boundaries between traditional cultures and the Christianity of colonial societies. In contrast, government-run boarding schools for Indigenous youth in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States suppressed Indigenous languages and taught Christianity and the colonizing culture with an English-only curriculum. Rayner and Eder, 2004. For Indigenous peoples there is often not a simple dichotomy between the missionary-labeled devils Indigenous paganism and Christianity. Eastman, 1980, who attended a mission school in 19th century South Dakota that taught
Oh my
reading and writing
god.
first in his Dakota language,
Just got
became
a
convinced
scam
after
text.
observing the materialism of late 19th century America that Christianity and modern literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis Group, 2013. ProQuest eBook Central, http://ebookcentral.piro.ks.com/lib/humboldt/detail.action?mark.id =$1143 Copyright 2013.
Oh.
Taylor and Francis Group, 72 John Rayner. Civilization are opposed and irreconcilable, and that the spirit of Christianity and of our ancient Sioux religion is essentially the same. p. 24.
I just
While
have to.
Eastman
I
and
have to stop for a moment, and we have to ooh and ah over my girlfriend's new kitten, little tiny baby. See, little tiny baby. Can't really see. Bad resolution.
and many other indigenous people accepted Christianity, sometimes after identifying it with their indigenous heritage, others did not. Hopi artist Kabadi, 1977, recalled, "I found the more outside education I receive, the more I appreciate the true Hopi way. When the missionaries would come into the village and try to convert us, I used to wonder why anyone would want to be a Christian if it meant becoming like those people." p. 12. Christianity and colonial languages usually went hand in hand, but missioner IES who preached and wrote in indigenous languages as well in the colonizing language, as was the case in the school Eastman attended, could be quite effective. Bender, 2009, notes that speaking the Cherokee language today in North Carolina is associated with older devout Christians. In contrast, some other indigenous Christian converts and their descendants today fear indigenous language revitali. Zashan efforts may promote the revival of indigenous religious beliefs. Parsons. Yutzie, 2003. Then there are those indigenous people with a syncretic approach to religion who see no boundaries. The anthropologist Farella, 1993, recalls a dialogue with a Navajo. There is one community with a lot of medicine men, one that is always referred to as traditional by those who know about such things, where I had the following conversation over and over again: "Are you a medicine man?" "Yes." "Do you believe in the traditional religion?" "Yes." "Are you a Catholic?" "Yes." "Native American Church?" "Sometimes." "Well, which is it, traditional, Catholic or peyote?" "Yes." p. 12. Christianity and cultural assimilation especially appealed.
Hold on, what? Are you a medicine man? Yes. Do you believe in the traditional religion? Yes. Are you a Catholic? Yes. Native American Church? Sometimes. Well, what is it? Traditional Catholic or peyote? Yes. It's both. Both and. Both and. The Catholic Church is very incredibly syncretic. Wherever you see Catholicism, wherever you see Catholicism go and meet an indigenous religion, you're going to see an output from that, and that's going to be the indigenous traditional practices religion combined with Catholicism. It's fucking everywhere.
Appealed
But
to
anyway,
indigenous peoples whose lives were turned upside down by
I like that.
virgin ground epidemics, loss of land, and other traumatic experiences that
It's not just accidentally syncretic; it's deliberately syncretic. Sometimes this is a product of resistance, like the resistance songs, right? Sometimes this is a product of the Catholic, church themselves changing different things to entice the indigenous people to convert. It's a product of many different things.
severely disrupted their way of life. It also appealed to the poor in less egalitarian indigenous societies. Socioeconomic boundaries. Maslow's, 1954, hierarchy of needs seems to be operant where indigenous people learn English and other world languages in order to get jobs so they can buy food and keep a roof over their head. Economic survival tends to take precedence over efforts to maintain heritage languages and cultures. However, if one has met the lower level needs in Maslow's hierarchy, then one can have the time and energy to work on something like indigenous language revitalization that probably has no immediate economic payback. Kanagaraja, 2011, examined how Tamils from different social classes who immigrated to the United States and Canada from Sri Lanka have either held literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis Group, 2013. ProQuest eBook Central. Copyright 2013. Confronting the wounds of
get jobs, they can buy food, keep a roof over their head. Economic survival tends to take precedence over efforts to maintain heritage, language, and cultures. However, if one has met the lower level needs in Maslow's hierarchy, then one can have time and energy to work on something like indigenous language revitalization that probably has no economic payback. I mean, and like one of the problems with that, one of the difficulties of that is like, who the fuck is meeting their lower level needs these days? But anyway.
Confronting the wounds of colonialism through words 73. Onto or jettisoned their heritage language. The upper classes that learned English before emigrating as professionals and speak a Tamil dialect of English are more interested in passing on Tamil to their children than the lower socio-economic status Tamils who emigrated as victims of the Sri Lankan Civil War or who are women. The latter group sees learning standard English as a way to enter the middle class in the United States and Canada. For them, Tamil currently lacks utility and has little attraction, in contrast to during the Sri Lankan Civil War when families sent their children to die as suicide bombers for language rights, p. 95. Among the Navajo in the United States, those able to accumulate large herds of sheep and occupy better grazing land are more likely to have political power within the Navajo tribal government where speaking Navajo is still important, though minutes of meetings are written in English, and practice traditional Navajo religion and speak Navajo, whereas poorer people in Navajo terms have more incentive to adopt white ways than those who are wealthier, including Christianity and speaking English. Levy and Kunitz.
So here we're saying, assimilation is something that people who are poor generally are coerced. I would call it coerced, disciplined, perhaps, into doing for survival, to survive. And people who are wealthier have a little bit more freedom, a little bit less discipline.
1974, p. 186, italics in original.
Bitches gotta eat.
Original. Colonial languages were often promoted using the argument that learning them was a way for indigenous people to advance economically as well as the way to become more civilized. However, that promised success often does not materialize with the switch to speaking only English. Within most poverty-stricken American Indian nations in the United States today, English is the first language of almost all the residents. The same is true for the Maori of New Zealand, Aborigines in Australia, and many other indigenous peoples who have not shared equally in the wealth of their countries, and naturally they can be very envious of that wealth and shamed by their own lack of it. Prestige boundaries. Gilmore, 2011, notes how studies of indigenous language loss voice complex narratives of shame, stigma, humiliation, and a deficit discourse surrounding languages and identities as well as counter-themes of pride in identity, use of the home language, and respect for community values, rituals, and knowledge to assimilation, pages 123 to 124. The languages of those in power in national governments are usually seen as superior to the languages of ethnic minorities, which are associated with being rural, backward, poor, and generally inferior. English and other international languages are seen as languages of prosperity, modernity, civilization, and progress. Anthropologists tend to see the notion of colonial superiority emanating from ethnocentrism, where people see the characteristics of the group they are born into, including language, to be the norm against which other cultures are measured, and those that are most different are seen as the most barbaric. The tendency of those in power is either to subordinate and slash or seek to assimilate people who are different. In the United States with its ideology of equality, assimilation is seen as the way to make subordinate...
Here we go. The tendency of those in power is to either subordinate, discipline, or seek to assimilate people who are different. So either we subordinate you, that means we make an example out of you, or we assimilate you. And what usually happens is you see people, who are being subordinated, and you decide to assimilate. And so assimilation is one of those things that's kind of fraught with the it's not something that everyone wants. You don't want to give up your culture. You don't want to give up your heritage. But do you want to be subordinated? Do you want to be disciplined? So you are forced to give up, to assimilate,
Subordinate ethnic and racial minorities. Literacy as translingual practice. Copyright 74 John Rayner. Gain equality with the white majority in a big melting pot. However, as indicated previously, giving up one's minority ethnic identity and language and speaking English have often not led to
I'm probably going to make some kind of every time I hear the word melting pot or the phrase
more
melting
economic
pot.
success. Indigenous languages were once all oral languages, but written languages have a prestige and a utility that unwritten languages lack. To survive in this modern world, it helps to have a written format, which requires some standardization. The Basque are one example of a group that worked to increase the prestige of their language by developing a writing system. Basque dialects in the south, northwestern Spain, and southwestern France, of the Basque country varied enough to cause difficulty with mutual intelligibility. For the purposes of writing and teaching in schools, central dialects were used to create a standardized Basque that would be understandable to all sections of the Basque country. Irajo Amatsaga, 2009. The creation of a Basque written corpus helps counter the rural backwater stereotype that speakers of indigenous languages can suffer under. 2. Further increase the prestige and prove that it was capable of expressing anything. Written in any human language, classics of world literature were translated into Basque. Irajo Amatsaga, 2009, p. 52. Ironically, however, for Basque authors to achieve a wider readership they need to write in a world language or have their works translated. As Basque authors Aldua, 2009, notes, English is the only language that allows any literature to be known worldwide. It is the passport to the world republic, that is to say market, of letters, p. 100. Purism and Golden Age boundaries. All languages change over time, and elders of all cultures can be dismayed by the slang dialect that youth often speak. Linguist Field, 2.
All languages change over time, and elders of all cultures can be dismayed by the slang dialect that youth often speak. I'm just gonna highlight because I like it.
2009 notes that Navajo elders who voice their criticism of the way young people speak an indigenous language may trigger linguistic insecurity on the part of younger imperfect speakers, which may lead to younger speakers' refusal to speak the language and intensify language shift to English. p. 47. She notes how young Navajo adults and adolescents can enthusiastically embrace code mixing, and perhaps less consciously, changes to Navajo grammar. p. 43. Another contentious idea is that indigenous languages are only for esoteric, not for public consumption traditional/ceremonial practices. In the 1990s, while teaching and taking classes at Navajo Community College, NCC, now called Dine College, House, 2002, found that approaches used to valorize and revitalize Navajo language and culture did so by oppositioning it to and devaluing white culture. This is a sort of revenge for the history of non-Indians systematically devaluing Navajo and other indigenous cultures. However, a nostalgic, but unrealistic, turning back to sheep herding and growing a small garden, living in a hogan, and driving a team of horses does nothing to help Navajos face the complex issues facing their future. p. 87. House notes how the Navajo, as is the case with other indigenous peoples, are faced with the dilemma. Literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor. Copyright 2. Confronting the wounds of colonialism through words 75. Of how to create an authentic yet viable Navajo identity in an irreversibly modern world, PXXVII. There are also romanticized notions of indigenous languages being linked to a more harmonious or spiritual worldview, and English as a cold noun-based language that is dead in both a spiritual and expressive sense. Gomez de Garcia, Axelrod, and Lackler, 2009, pages 100, 109 and 121. In contrast, native languages are seen as verb-based and more expressive and spiritual, which is associated with the fact that, sometimes, the spiritual and ceremonial domains are the only ones left for the native language. One can speculate whether this perception results from many people not learning English beyond a conversational proficiency and never accessing its vast literature. House, 2002, also found in some classrooms at NCC the white man's shadow phenomenon, where white culture is portrayed as monolithically greedy, materialistic, etc., and natives are the opposite, generous. spiritual, etc. Simmer, 1990.
Wait,
This
hold on.
dichotomization goes against many, if not most, of the traditional values of most indigenous peoples. For example, Hopi scholar Nicholas, 2011, notes, the fundamental principles of the Hopi way of life are those of reciprocity and humility, p. 60. Another barrier that can be thrown up to language revitalization is illustrated in Jaffe's, 2011, examination of how Corsican is taught in schools. Language purists look for some untainted form of their language before it was impacted by French, Spanish, English, Portuguese, or some other more powerful language, but there is no such golden age. Such efforts can lead to teaching a form of a language, in this case Corsican, that is only taught and used in classrooms. Such efforts produce a school-based monoglot standard that has little likelihood of catching on more widely. This same language artificiality is noted by King and Haybode, 2011, in Ecuador. There, in the last 2 decades, Quechua has left the home and become mainly a school subject. On the colonizer's side, the inaccurate belief in a linguistic form of social Darwinism that a superior, more fit language, like English, will naturally replace an inferior, more savage language can damage outside support for indigenous language revitalization efforts. Mulder, 2009, p. 245. Boas, 1940, known as the father of American anthropology, put forward the concept of cultural relativism, where cultures cannot be ranked as more or less inferior or superior, they are just different. Linguists take the same view of languages. Generational boundaries. Elders see their language as a way of passing down important cultural values and the wisdom of the ages, not teaching math, science, and other school subjects. Of course those subjects can be taught in any language, and teaching them in an immersion school in the indigenous language, as is done in Hawaiian and Maori language immersion schools, does not preclude teaching traditional values as well. Literacy as translingual practice, between copyright 76 John Rayner. Nicholas, 2011, notes that Hopi elders see the current decline in speaking Hopi as associated with youth's un-Hopi behavior, leading to gang activity and disrespect for elders, whereas the Hopi language, as previously mentioned, is associated with traditional values of hard work and, as previously mentioned, reciprocity and humility. Lafarges, 1929, Pulitzer Prize-winning 1929 novel Laughing Boy attempts to give a flavor of what Navajo language and culture are like as written in English, and shows the impact of colonization. He links the decline in his heroine's moral values and behavior to her English-only assimilationist education in government boarding schools and living closer to the reservation-bound Erie and interacting with non-Navajos. At Rock Point, located in the interior of the Navajo Nation in the 1970s, the All-Navajo School Board concluded that it was the breakdown of a working knowledge of Navajo kinship that caused much of what they perceived as inappropriate, un-Navajo behavior. The way back, they felt, was to teach students that system, Holm and Holm, 1990, p. 178. Navajo and other indigenous grandparents can sometimes not even talk to their grandchildren who only know English. To counteract this collapse, the Rock Point School Board established a successful Navajo, English bilingual program in their school that emphasized Navajo social studies and the Navajo beliefs about kinship. For the Navajo and other tribes, kinship through extended family and clans establishes rules for interacting respectfully, and this interaction is reflected in the language itself. Navajo and many other indigenous languages subordinate nouns to verbs. Linguists describe it as a polysynthetic language. According to linguist Midget, 1997, sentences in these languages often consist of single.
Hold on a second. Polysynthetic language. Subordinate nouns to verbs. What does that mean? Highly synthetic languages, which words are composed of many morphemes, word parts that have independent meaning but may or may not be able to stand alone. Word parts, so morphemes. I know what that is. I took linguistics. I know what that means. Are often but not necessarily. Okay, so okay, S in cats. So S is the morpheme. There's cat, right? And then there's cats, which is multiple cats. S indicates that there are many cats. The S is a morpheme. It's its own part of it's its own piece of meaning. But it can't stand on its own. It has to be with something else. So let's see. Bilingual. Bilingual. I mean, yeah, I mean, I know like bisexual, but bi is actually, it's, it's a morpheme. What else? What else? What else? Kinship. Ship, sure, go to hell. Ship can also mean like a boat, but kin is the word, ship is the morpheme. I think that's how it is. Maybe I might be wrong. Establishes. Establish is. Think. Interacting. Interact. Ing. Respectfully. So respect fully. No, respectfully is a compound word. So fully is not a morpheme, I don't think. Oh, here in the thing is unbreakable. So 3 morphemes. Wait. Yeah. Okay, so unbreakable. Is a bound morpheme. Break is a free morpheme. That means it can stand on its own. And able. Okay, so then, where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Respectfully. So fully and respect and fully, right? Fully is its own word. You can fully respect someone, or you can act respectfully towards someone. Okay? Yeah.
Single, very complex words, with roots, prefixes, and suffices occurring in a fixed
I'm
order,
opening
as
so many
opposed to
tabs.
English, which is an analytic language, which accumulates a number of relatively short and simple words, p33. She also gives a Navajo example of how translation from one language to another can be difficult, using the Navajo word hasho, which lies at the heart of their worldview, writing this word can only be translated by 3 separate English words, peace, harmony, and beauty, p40. In her doctoral research, Parsons Yates CA, 1995, found, elder Navajos want to pass on their knowledge and wisdom to the younger generation. Today the younger generation does not know the language and is unable to accept the words of wisdom, p1. She concludes, the use of the native tongue is like therapy, specific native words express love and caring. Knowing the language presents one with a strong self-identity, a culture with which to identify, and a sense of well-ness, p3. Ethnocentric national boundaries. In the United States and Europe, demographics are changing, resulting in ethnic minorities becoming a larger percentage of many nations' populations. A recession to this change, which can be seen as endangering the hegemony of English literacy as translingual practice, between confronting the wounds of colonialism through words 77, is the current effort by some conservatives to pass a constitutional amendment making English the official language of the United States. Combs, Gonzalez, and Mall, 2011, note how in the American Southwest there has been a long-term and still ongoing concerted effort of assimilation and subordination of the Mexican population, especially through coercive Americanization programs in the schools and the imposition of the English language at all costs, p. 185. Historian Blanton, 2004, documents how, through most of history, English-only education for Mexican Americans has disadvantaged them. An attempt was made in the United States, starting in 1968 with the passage of the Bilingual Education Act, to provide more culturally appropriate education, but the fear initiated by the rising tide of Spanish-speaking immigrants from Latin America that can be seen as drowning the descendants of the old immigrant population from Europe helped lead to the passage of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, which focused on English language acquisition without native language support. There is an ideology, especially espoused in the United States by conservative politicians, that the national language, in their case English, is the glue that holds the nation together. See, example Rayner, 2001. This ignores multiple civil wars across the globe, including the United States' bloodiest war, in which both sides spoke the same language. This ideology of one nation, one language ignores stable multilingual countries, of which Switzerland is an exemplar, and presupposes a standard version of a language despite the fact that languages vary from place to place. Gilmore, 2011, notes, equating language and nation is an historical and ideological construct, p. 125. What has the potential of holding nations and the world together is a commitment to liberty and justice for all and a respect for everyone's human rights. With the formation of the United Nations after World War II there has been a steady development of human rights declarations and conventions, culminating in the adoption of the UN's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2007, Rayner and Singh, 2010. With globalization and the flattening of the world, the suppression of minority languages that was practiced by many nation-states is easing, and there is a growing respect for cultural pluralism. For example, with the development of the European Union, it was necessary to protect the languages of the various member states, and that in turn is a wedge used to protect all languages spoken in Europe. According to the European Union's European Commission on Multilingualism, 2012, the EU's language policy promotes multilingualism and aims for a situation in which every EU citizen can speak at least 2 foreign languages in addition to their mother tongue, NP. Article 22 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union states, the Union shall respect cultural, religious, and linguistic diversity. In addition, the Council of Europe, 1995, which includes even more member states than the European Union, has a framework convention for the protection of national minorities. Section 2, Article 5 of the Convention declares, the parties undertake to promote the conditions necessary for persons belonging to literacy as translingual practice, between communities and class. Copyright 78 John Rayner. National minorities to maintain and develop their culture, and to preserve the essential elements of their identity, namely their religion, language, traditions, and cultural heritage, NP. As Korki Kivi, 2008, head of the Council of Europe's Secretariat on the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, notes, what is unique about the convention is that it includes a
Minorities. It sounded like she said like minoritis. Like being a minor is a disease. Sorry kids, you are diseased.
monitoring provision to gain compliance by signatory states, and Article 15 that guarantees effective participation of minorities in decision-making, p. 149. Conclusion. Many of the perceived boundaries among cultures and nations are based on superficial observations of different cultures, as well as some very real differences, compounded by the inability to understand each other's languages. As explorer and first director of the U.S. Bureau of Ethnology, Powell, 1896, noted, over a century ago. So few Americans yet realize that of all the people on this continent, including even ourselves, the most profoundly religious, if by religion is meant fidelity to teachings and observations that are regarded as sacred, are the American Indians, especially wherever still unchanged from their early condition, and this deeply religious feeling of theirs might, if properly appreciated, be made use of, not weakened or destroyed by premature opposition. Pages 112 to 113. Close observation of even widely different cultures tends to show a common humanity that is masked by language, dress, and other differences. The wounds indigenous peoples have suffered from ethnocentric assimilationist colonial policies are still being inflicted, but the various international human rights initiatives today are promising a better future. The unfulfilled promises of assimilation, including learning English, and a concomitant decline in traditional values, leading to dysfunctional behavior, especially among the young, is one cause for the current interest in indigenous language revitalization. In addition, even though more and more American Indian and other indigenous children speak only English, Spanish or some other colonial language, the economic and educational gap between them and white non-indigenous peoples remains. Alexei's successful escape from the poverty and problems of his Spokane Indian reservation by attending a white school off the reservation fictionalized in his The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is an option available to a gifted few. Alexei, 2007. One can argue that language immersion schools that promote a strong sense of indigenous identity while supporting academic achievement are an alternative that show great promise, even though they are only available to a few in the United States. Hill and May, 2011, note that learning Maori in literacy as translingual practice. Copyright Confronting the Wounds of Colonialism through Words 79. New Zealand immersion schools helps children know who they are and, as they were told by one interviewee, if they know who they are able to stand strong in the world, and they see the goal of Maori medium education is for students to become citizens of the world. Pages 172 to 173, emphasis in original. Their research finds that 7 years of Maori medium education starting in preschool gives children a solid foundation that can withstand the onslaught of learning and becoming very competent in world languages such as English. This is the approach being taken by the European Union and Council of Europe towards languages, and other countries need to see indigenous language revitalization as a basic human right. In our new globalized and flat world, we need citizens who are multilingual and who can cross boundaries and overcome ethnocentrism to understand and appreciate better other cultures that often appear, on the surface, to be so very different from their own. Alexei's advice is to leave the reservation with its poor schools located in a dysfunctional, poverty-stricken environment, but that is not really an option for many indigenous people. Inner-city urban schools that serve the urban poor are as noted for their lack of educational success as are reservation schools. Berliner, 2009. Alexei, 2007, especially confronts the necessity to become educated and deal with life today. However, indigenous people can find strength to confront the modern world in their traditional languages and cultures. Towards the end of Alexei's book, Arnold, recovering from the death of his sister, discusses his many identities. Reservations were meant to be prisons, you know? Indians were supposed to move onto reservations and die. We were supposed to disappear. But somehow or another, Indians have forgotten that reservations were meant to be death camps. I realized that, sure, I was a Spokane Indian. I belonged to that tribe. But I also belonged to the tribe of American immigrants. And to the tribe of basketball players. And to the tribe of bookworms. Pages 216 to 217. While in some places language and culture are viewed as inseparable, in other places native identity is linked to cultural activities that can be practiced in an English-speaking environment, as Alexei describes on the Spokane Reservation in Washington state. However, as a language becomes more endangered it can become a badge of identity. Field and Criscritti, 2009, p. 20. What many native groups say they really want to teach is identity, and language serves as part of that identity. Gomez de Garcia et al., 2009, p. 118. A strong positive identity can be seen as the key to success in life. Speaking at the U.S. Office of Indian Education's Language and Culture Preservation Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2004, former Menominee Nation chairperson Abe Zainaquat recalled that, in Catholic school, the nuns, in literacy as translingual practice, copyright 80 John Rayner, effect, told their students to throw stones at the elders. He opined that Indians today have tasted cherry pie, the good things of modern America, and we like it. However, Indians today are like fish lying on the beach. We need to be in that water of our culture. Abe Zainaquat, Personal Communication, March 8, 2004. References. References.
I'm not really sure what to think about that. Tasted the cherry pie, good things of modern America, and we like it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I they really want to teach identity. Language serves as part of that identity. Strong, positive identity can be seen as the key to success in life. I mean, I want to know what I really think. This is kind of it stinks of lib shit. It stinks of lib shit. And it's one of those things where it's like we're we're reading about people talking about their own life and their own experiences. So like, it's hard, it's a little bit more complicated to critique because like, you know, but at the same time, I think I think there's a line that kind of Alexei's successful escape from poverty and problems of his Spokane Indian reservation by attending a white school off the reservation fictionalized in his book is an option available to a gifted few. Yeah, I think that's the whole. That's it. Like we're talking about a few people who have these opportunities. A few people who are allowed the opportunity to assimilate. If one can even call that an opportunity. I mean, he calls it an opportunity, I guess. Um, I've heard this word. It's not a new word, but I've heard this like phrase before. It's like survivor bias, and I think that's kind of probably what's going on here. Like I escaped, so you can too. You just have to go get an education, of course. And that's why I say it's lib shit, because like it's the neoliberal like just get an education and be productive and all that shit, and you will be able to escape too. But let's tie this back to the previous article. In the previous article, people are going to the US, they're learning English, they're getting jobs on the plantations, and the plantation is not really providing opportunity. No matter how hard you work, you just get shit. So it's like, sure, maybe a few lucky people, get opportunity. But the majority of people in this situation of assimilation get jack shit. And that's when you go through the process of assimilation. Like the reward that you were promised at the end of the tunnel is jack shit. So like even assimilation does not guarantee that you get something that is sustaining or fulfilling to you. And so it's kind of this, and here's where we see the conflict of this article is, or paper, or chapter, is that there's a taste of the cherry pie, and you can like the taste of the cherry pie, but is the cherry pie going to sustain you? Is the aesthetic we were talking about yesterday, where the aesthetic of a cute house going to sustain you as you're walking down the stairs and you trip and fall on the thing on the stairs that you forgot to put away, and there's no hand railing that you can grab onto to save you from your fall, and then you fall down the stairs and break your neck? Can the aesthetic solve the problems of your material reality? No. No. No, it can't. And so we have the you can pursue the aesthetic, or you can pursue community. And community doesn't always mean comfort, right? A lot of the time, I mean, just think about, if you have asshole parents, you're in community with them. But they're still assholes, and that doesn't always mean comfort. But it's community in a world that is incredibly alienating, right? And I don't think there's any easy answers or any easy solutions to this, but I do think that if we just educate people, it's kind of lip shit. It's kind of lip shit. Yeah, no, it's very much lip. I mean, okay, and like we are reading a book that is about educating people. And I would say that my key conflict with this text is that, not like this particular one, but like the book in general, is that I believe in education for the sake of education. I believe that like any type of education you get is just valuable because, I mean, not like, oh, like there's some types of education that are probably bad, but like the value of education is in having an educated populace, like people who know things. And the more things the people know, the better the people are at responding to the things that they don't like, right? If I have knowledge, I can build criticisms of the current, conditions that I am being subjected to, which is not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, but at the same time, I do feel like knowledge exists independent of anything that seems like a direct material game. Like, you should not go pursue knowledge for a career. That's not really how any of it works. Knowledge does not guarantee a career. You could go to school for however many years and still not get hired to do a job. So we're not really pursuing knowledge to get a career. I think we just have to kind of, sure, you could pursue knowledge to get a career doing some shit job that you're not getting paid for. So we're not really pursuing knowledge for wealth. Let's put it that way. We're not really pursuing knowledge for wealth. What are we pursuing knowledge for? What is knowledge? What's the value of knowledge? And once again, I'm going to keep saying it. It goes back to having an educated populace who can, um, dress, I forget what I said. No, it's what I said. Just rewind a little bit, and you'll know what I said.
Anyway. John Rayner. Effect told their students to throw.
We already finished it. Okay, let's go on to the next one then. No, we're not going to highlight that. I was going to highlight it, but I'm like, we don't really need to highlight that, I don't think. The Cherokee Syllabary, the evolution of writing in Sequoian. Let's go.
In 1821, a Cherokee man named Sequoyah presented his invention of a non-alphabetic writing system to the Cherokee Tribal Council in Echota. This system relies upon 86 characters that were originally designed in longhand before being reduced to print and are now seen in Unicode-based fonts on the internet and in text messaging. In this chapter, I overview the evolution.
Now seen in Unicode-based fonts on the internet and text messaging. Now I want to see this. I want to know what this is. So I'm finding old documents, like very old documents. Okay. I don't know. How can I copy? Paste. Go. So I'm thinking this is what we're talking about. That's not what I meant to do. Why do you suck so bad? I didn't want to open the whole entire article. I just want to get a better look at the picture. Anyway.
Evolution of this writing SYSTEM from script, to print, to digital forms to demonstrate how Cherokees weave Sequoian alongside the alphabet today to maintain a unique written legacy that is directly related to language preservation efforts. This indigenous writing SYSTEM developed outside of an alphabetic influence, though alongside this predominant script challenges what counts as literacy. It's not just about the letter, and demands a larger understanding of meaning-making with writing systems that are othered by the ubiquity of the alphabet. Drawing on evidence gathered over 6 years of ethno-historic...
Hold on. Challenges what counts as literacy. Demands a larger understanding of meaning making with writing systems that are othered by the ubiquity of the alphabet. What does ubiquity mean? Not what I meant to do. Paste and go. My throat hurts because the fact of appearing everywhere or being very common. That's what I thought, but I was like, let's make sure. Let's go. Wait. So, meaning making with writing systems that are othered by the ubiquity. Okay, so writing systems. Wait, so like the English alphabet, an alphabetic influence. Are there? I don't know.
Ethnohistorical research. This chapter expands
Specificity
on
of
the work of
language,
Mignolo,
please.
2003, Baca, 2008, and Baca and Villanueva, 2010.
Ethnohistorical research. This chapter expands on the work of those people who help us move back past alphabetic bias. Okay.
2010, who help us move past the alphabetic bias and situate texts that accommodate hybrid codes and conventions. In the ongoing effort to free literacy scholars from the Western bias of American literacy history, Mignolo's 1992 seminal work on literacy and programs of colonization in the Americas explored how literacy became part and parcel of the colonization of American Indians. This colonization included writing grammars of indigenous languages through an ideological program that impinged on the jurisdiction and implementation of spreading Western literacy in the New World, p. 50. Viewing all meaning making through an alphabetic screen, this program worked simultaneously at the instrumental and ideological levels of influence, p. 48. Building on Mignolo's 1992-2003 path-breaking work, Bacchus, 2008 book exploring Mestiza at Scripts corrects the rigid evolutionary proposition that all writing systems profess toward. Literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classrooms. Copyright Cop 84 Ellen Cushman. The letter, that alphabetic literacy is the pinnacle of all other systems of recorded knowledge, p. 7. Drawing scholarly attention to hybrid scripts, Baca examines the material reality of meaning-making to correct the Western bias in literacy studies as he illuminates the importance of reading and writing for colonized groups. These corrective studies do double duty. On the one hand, they afford a theoretical lens through which writing systems can be understood from an indigenous perspective, and on the other, they add to the growing body of research that demonstrates the meaning-making potentials of othered writing systems. When a writing system succeeds in resisting an alphabetic bias to become a permanent instructional resource for native peoples, it satisfies several instrumental and cultural needs of the people using it. Anthropologist Walker, 1969, finds, the history of the 19th century suggests that native literacy is accepted. To the extent that it is based on a syllabic writing system, it is available to adults. It is adapted to both sacred and secular contexts, and perhaps most importantly, that it is disseminated independently of white educational institutions, p. 166. Certainly the Cherokee syllabary met all of these demands in its script and print forms. The Cherokee writing system was first learned in manuscript form and was disseminated quickly throughout the tribe within 3 years of its introduction, without print or mass education. With the advent of Cherokee in print in 1827, a literary legacy became public and broadly disseminated through newspapers, hymnals, the New Testament, primers, and the Cherokee Almanac. It was used up until the early 1900s throughout the tribe's educational institutions, even as English was fast becoming the official language of the nation and Cherokee schools. After allotment ended in 1906, the tribal government was dissolved and with it went a tremendous amount of publication of Sequoian, though the writing remained in use in communities through manuscript form in the Baptist churches, stomp grounds, and in texts used by medicine people. With the Indian Self-Determination Act in 1972, the Cherokee Nation was re-established and developed bilingual education materials in print along with online language learning materials for the language classes and immersion school. Most recently, Sequoian can be seen online in Facebook pages, in text messaging, on iPod applications, and in Wikipedia. This evolutionary story of the Cherokee syllabary from script to print begs the question, what aspects of its instrumentality might have lent to its adaptability and long-standing use? A writing system in its own right. To answer the above question, scholars need to understand this writing system in its own right. Cushman, 2011 c. Viewing it apart from an alphabetic bias that tends to see it using the Roman alphabet as a baseline for analysis.
Okay, so we are talking about general, like alphabets in general.
Alphabet, it is often approached as though it was. In her exploration of the materiality of the letter, Drucker, 1997, incorrectly insists. Literacy as translingual practice, copyright 2013. Taylor and The Cherokee Syllabary, The Evolution of Writing in Sequoian 85.
Like the concept of the alphabet.
Never chief, borrowed heavily from the designs of the alphabet when he invented.
So then I'm thinking in that case we're talking about morphemes. Morphemes again. It's not an alphabet, it's a morpheme. All right. So an A, like, that's not a good. The letter B. The letter B is not a morpheme, right? The word be, like to be or not to be, or be like bumblebee, can be considered a morpheme, right? But the letter B is not a morpheme. The letter B does not have any meaning on its own. It's just a letter. It's just something that combines with other things to make more things. So I think what we're talking about here is the Cherokee syllabary. I think what we're talking about is morpheme. They're morphemes. I might be wrong.
Cherokee syllabary.
This is what I understand so far.
Anthropologist Mooney, 1892, claims the syllabary has several defects, and uses the words syllabary and alphabet interchangeably to describe Sequoyah's invention, p. 64. And Holmes and Smith, 1976, authors
What is
of
a
the
syllabary? We should have looked that up first. Syllabary. Set of written characters representing syllables in some languages or stage of writing, serving the purpose of an alphabet. Okay, so they use it interchangeably. Well, not interchangeably, in some. So syllables. So then it's even less than a morpheme then. So it's syllables or morphemes which make up words. Example of a syllabary. Hiragana and katakana syllabaries used for Japanese. Okay. Still don't. Alphabets use symbols. Syllabaries can have several hundred. Okay, so alphabets use a set of less than 100 symbols. Syllabaries can have several hundred. Logographies can have thousands. Is English a syllabary? I'm looking at the Google questions. Although English has syllables and we know them if we know the pronunciation of the word, our writing does not mark the syllables in any way. English does not use a syllabary. Some languages use a system that focuses on the syllable. In a syllabary, one symbol denotes an entire syllable. Okay. So forgotten, right? So if we had one symbol for for, one symbol for got, and then one symbol for 10. Okay. That makes sense.
Book for Cherokee language learners, incorrectly classify the syllabary as a variety of alphabet, p8. I'll judge the design and utility of the Cherokee writing system using an alphabetic baseline for comparison. I'll analyze the Cherokee
Hold on. I'll judge the design and utility of a writing system as an alphabetic baseline for comparison. I'll analyze Cherokee writing system from an alphabetic perspective. And I'll rely on the syllabary chart as their primary source of evidence for their claims. In doing so, the potential visual and linguistic powers of the original syllabary are lost on literacy scholars and language learners who rely on this chart. Has several defects. A variety of alphabet. I actually read in my drunken Skyrim voice in class the other day, and it was kind of funny.
Primary source of evidence for their claims. In so doing, the potential visual and linguistic powers of the original syllabary are lost on literacy scholars and language learners who rely on this chart. Sequoyah eschewed English. Cushman 2011a originally wrote the syllabary in longhand characters that bore no resemblance to alphabetic letters. Cushman 2011b, 2011c, Walker and Sarbaugh 1993, and arranged it in an order that drew upon a visual mnemonic. Cushman, 2010. The Cherokee quickly became fluent in Sequoian within just a few years of its introduction in longhand. A reduction of the longhand characters to print forms was in use in 1825, 2 years before Samuel Worcester even arrived at Brainerd Mission to work with the Cherokees. Cherokees alone developed the script and printed designs for these characters from a shorthand that had been in use for 6 years before print. A visual analysis of each script and print form revealed that 67 of 85 of characters, 78.8%, took their visual cues from the original longhand versions. Roman glyphs were borrowed when they retained some element of the original characters. In other words, any connection the Cherokee syllabary may have to the Roman alphabet has been imagined more than real. When it moved to print, the manuscript form retained some elements of the longhand, which helps to explain why no decrease in reading and writing rates were noticed during this time. While much of the visual information was retained, important linguistic information was obscured when it moved to print, thanks to Worcester, Cushman 2010. In 1827, the original arrangement, longhand, and shorthand of the writing system had been standardized into print using this arrangement made popular by Moravian missionary, Samuel Worcester. Worcester had reordered the original characters of the Cherokee syllabary following the orthographic rules of the Latin alphabet, figure 8.1. Just under the Cherokee alphabet, 2 complete sets of characters are included, characters as arranged by the inventor and characters systematically arranged with the sounds, figure 8.2, assuming, of course, that Sequoia's arrangement had no system. The vowels were then listed in alphabetic order and the combinations were roughly arranged alphabetically, save for the D/T combinations of sounds, which in Cherokee can sound similar. Each character was assigned a transliteration to roughly equivalent sounds in English. By 1846 the new arrangement of the Cherokee alphabet had become standardized, in part, through these 2 publications, Cushman, 2010, 2011 c. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor.
I just have to pause here also to fast forward past that. But the ladies are fighting. The cats are fighting in the parking
Taylor
lot.
and Francis, copyright 2013. Taylor and
it's not kitten season.
Dash and AAE.
Oh look, here's the picture that we were looking for. I'll scroll slowly. Oh, look at that. Misnamed. Okay. Oh, look at that. Characters arranged by the inventor. Okay. Oh, look, we can highlight those. Initially published as issue 1 of the Cherokee Phoenix by Samuel Worcester. Characters systematically arranged with the sounds. Okay.
The characters were systematically arranged in a way that mimics the way English alphabetic writing is ordered and taught, figure 8.2. Though it is not an alphabet, calling the syllabary a Cherokee alphabet had a rhetorical effect for settlers, political leaders, and reformers, who perceived Cherokees as more civic.
Hold on. Calling the syllabary. Okay, so we're talking about the choice. This article is about the choice to call it a syllabary or an alphabet. Why did we choose to call it that? Well, not we, but the people. Why did people choose to call it Cherokee alphabet? Because of the rhetorical effect for settlers, political leaders, and reformers who perceived Cherokees as more civilized because of the alphabet. So this is what was mentioned in the other article about giving languages that don't have written forms as a way of appearing more civilized.
Civilized because of this alphabet 1. The rearrangement of characters rests on conventions similar to those used in alphabetic literacy primers that organized spelling and vocabulary lessons around consonant, vowel combinations. The arrangement in print versions of the syllabary should have had little impact on people's abilities to learn it. In fact, given the ways in which this standardized version is keyed to the alphabet, it should have made learning Cherokee much easier for those whose first language was English. But that was not the case. For English speakers, this standardized arrangement of the syllabary may have drawn too much attention to the sounds of characters, diverting attention from the ways in which the syllabary actually represents much more than sound. Mooney, 1892, describes how difficult it was for English speakers to learn the Cherokee syllabary through the standardized syllabary chart. A number of the characters are so nearly alike that they can scarcely be distinguished even in the most fully written manuscript. There is no logical connection of characters denoting related sounds as TSA, TSA, TSI, etc., and finally each character commonly requires several strokes in the making. p. 63. The Cherokee syllabary is difficult to learn for those raised with English as their first language. As Mooney noted, characters resemble each other and require several strokes, sometimes seeming to show no logical connection between the characters and related sounds. Though the Cherokee writing system is difficult to learn for people whose first language is English, it carries its own cultural log ICS, meanings, and values that abide today, if we view it outside of the alphabetic lens. Figure 8.2 The Cherokee Alphabet, initially published in Issue 1 of the Cherokee Phoenix, February 21, 1828, by Samuel Worcester, with its
Oh, she's sending us back to there.
88 Ellen Cushman. Relying on this standardized chart, scholars, well-meaning missionaries, and the general public alike have misunderstood the history and instrumentality of the Cherokee writing system, approaching it as though it was more akin to the Latin alphabet than it actually is. When seen through an alphabetic lens, though, the instrumentality of the Cherokee syllabary is reduced to its simplest function, it seems to merely encode sound with each character. To say that the instrumental workings of the Cherokee syllabary rest at the level of character-sound correspondence, however, underestimates the potential representational power of each character in a word. Not every character has the same depth of representational power. For example, the character /hi/ can be both a pronoun prefix as well as suffix in the same verb phrase. The meaning potential is activated by its location in the verb phrase.
What? Pronoun prefix as well as a suffix in the same verb phrase. Meaning potential is activated by its location in the verb phrase. That's far too technical for me.
If only
I'm not
understood
going to
as
try
working
to.
at the phonetic
Not
level,
going to. I'm
though,
not
the
even. I'm
potential
not.
heuristic power of the syllabary
Very
is lost
technical.
on Cherokee
Very
language
technical
learned
language
ERS
going
and
on there.
scholars.
I'm
To
just
free the
not
Cherokee
equipped.
syllabary from the
I mean,
alphabetic bias,
technically, I
there,
guess I am
involves a
equipped,
shift in
but
terms that one might typically use to describe reading and
No,
writing,
thank you.
letters,
I'm good.
literacy, literate, and the alphabet. These words, so taken for granted in discussions of reading and writing, are no longer useful for describing the Cherokee writing system, if indeed they ever were. The etymologies of these words link them to one writing system alone. Letters are only of alphabets. Literacy in its denotative sense is to work fluently with letter-sound correspondences. To be literate is to be fluent with the letter or to be lettered, from the Latin literatus, and the word alphabet represents the first two Greek letters alpha and beta taken to mean the whole set of letters. This constellation of terms always links reading and writing to the letter, indeed links seemingly all domains of knowledge and knowledge-making to literacy. Wysocki and Johnson Eola, 1999. This chapter changes the terms on which and through.
Hold on. Constellation of terms always links reading and writing to the letter. Indeed, links seemingly all domains of knowledge and knowledge making to literacy. Oh.
Through which reading
Let's
and
keep
writing in
going.
Cherokee is understood. The term character describes each individual mark in the Cherokee syllabary, because it reflects more closely the ways in which these were created, designed, and redesigned for print, and the ways these work instrumentally. Some of the Cherokee people with whom I work are fluent readers and writers of Sequoian, and they may also be literate in the Roman alphabet. And the Cherokee writing system as a whole is described as a syllabary that shows morphographic qualities. While each character in the writing system represents sound units, it also can potentially represent additional linguistic information depending on the order of the syllables. Let me illustrate this last rather remarkable claim. Not just a syllabary. In the first evolutionary phase of the Cherokee writing system, Sequoia invented a system wherein each character can potentially represent not just sound, but semantic, morphological, and syntactical information as well. For example, the Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis Group, 2013. ProQuest eBook Central, http://ebook central, copyright The Cherokee Syllabary, The Evolution of Writing in Sequoian 89. Verb phrase /tohitsu/ is a common greeting used with a familiar person, loosely translating to how are you. But its exact translation reveals more. /dohi/ is a root meaning at peace, well, harmony, balance. /tsu/ is a second person singular pronoun meaning you. /dohi/ can also be used as an adjective meaning well, health. In response to this phrase, a Cherokee speaking formally would reply, /tohikuaya, nihina / loosely translated to
How
I
does
am
that
well,
happen?
and you.
How does that
Again,
keep
the
happening?
exact translations of each character reveals more meaning. /tohi/ is a root meaning at peace, well, harmony, balance /kuyu/ first person singular pronoun meaning I myself, my person /nihi/ second person pronoun you /na/ pronoun suffix meaning, and what about?
Okay. Common ingredient used with a familiar person, loosely translating to how are you. Its exact translation reveals more. So, a root, meaning at peace, well, harmony, balanced. Second person singular pronoun, meaning you. Also used as an adjective, meaning well. I am well, and you. Again, at peace, well, harmony, balanced. I, myself. You. What about you? Huh.
Cherokee is what linguists call a polysynthetic language.
Oh, there's polysynthetic again. So the morphemes.
Language,
Morphemes.
in which words can consist of a high number of morphemes, those smallest meaningful units in the grammar of a language. Said another way, one multisyllabic word in Cherokee can be an entire sentence in which each syllable uttered carries with it meaning.
I'll be right back. My candles melted like all the way down here. I'll show you. It's burning hot wax in there, so I can't really tip it around much. But yeah, that happened. I don't think it's damaged or anything, but that was fun. That was real fun. All the wax is just popping right off. Like I should dump out the wax or something. Get it out of there. I don't know. I'll probably dig it out with a knife later. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. It's just, a little inconvenience.
Meaning, e.g. the
A
Cherokee
little
word for
friendly
goodbye is a sentence that reads, /Donadagovi/ you and I saw each other again. In Cherokee, a verb phrase like this is a complete sentence that has morphological rules governing which syllables can be used as prefixes, roots, and suffixes. These verb phrases paint pictures of the action unfolding, can be up to 14 syllables, and can potentially indicate where, who, with what, to whom, doing what, how, and when, in one word. This polysynthetic structure of Cherokee lends itself well to a writing system in which each grapheme represents more than just sound, but also the potential underlying morphological elements of the language. Over the decade or so it took Sequoyah to invent this system, he reported to interviewers that he had tried 2 other forms of representation, pictographs and logographs, Cushman, 2011a, 2011b. He created a system that blends the economy of a syllabary with the meaningfulness of morphographic systems and, in so doing, Sequoyah closely represents this polysynthetic language. Point 2 Unfortunately, this instrumentality is lost upon English language speakers using Worcester's alphabetical orthography. With Worcester's arrangement as a key to the language, scholars and Cherokee language learners are misled to assume that they only need to look for a simple decoding of phonetic information. Character represents sound, just like an alphabet. End of story. When Cherokee moved into print, its instrumentality, largely obscured to English-speaking audiences, remained present for Cherokees, who printed millions of pages of documents in Sequoian and continued to use it in manuscript form as well from 1827 to the 1900s. In addition to numerous Bible translations, Literacy as translingual practice, between community. Copyright 90 Ellen Cushman. Hymn books, and other religious works, writes Mooney, 1900, there have been printed in the Cherokee language and syllabary the Cherokee Phoenix, Jour Nal, Cherokee Advocate, Journal, Cherokee Messenger, Periodical, Cherokee Almanac, Annual, Cherokee Spelling Books, Arithmetics, and other schoolbooks for those unable to read English, several editions of the Laws of the Nation, and a large body of tracts and minor publications, p. 112. Public uses of the syllabary were equally diverse and widespread. Handwritten Cherokee was found in letter writing, council records, personal memoranda, etc., as well as extensive recording and documentation of medicines and prayers for the purpose of preserving to their successors the ancient rituals and secret knowledge of the tribe, p. 112. Three presses contributed to the flourishing of literature published for Cherokees during this time, the Park Hill Press, Cherokee Nation Press, and Baptist Mission Press. Between 1835 and 1860 the Park Hill Press run by Samuel Worcester took partial responsibility for the proliferation of printed materials available in Cherokee and English. This press printed 13,980,000 pages of books, tracts, pamphlets, and passages from the Bible in both the Cherokee writing system and alphabet. White, 1962, p. 511. The ubiquity of manuscript and print coupled with the ease of use of the syllabary made it a powerful tool in persevering in the Cherokee language for everyday life as well as documenting and codifying traditional ways and histories. Numerous manuscript items also remain as part of a legacy of social documents that Cherokees wrote in their everyday lives. The manuscript forms of writing, along with the printed New Testament and hymns, became a literary legacy that allowed Cherokees to continue writing and reading the language throughout some of the darkest years after the Dawes General Allotment Act disbanded tribal governments and divided all commonly held lands into individual parcels of private property. Cushman, 2006. Cherokees who spoke and wrote the language during this time did so in what Waroftig, 1998, called a calculated inconspicuousness, p. 96. Cherokees in small towns in Oklahoma, organized around traditional Stomp and Cherokee Baptist churches, continued practicing the language, reading, and writing in Cherokee. They opted out of white mainstream institutions that failed to support, indeed often violently repressed, the Cherokee language. When external validation of the Cherokee language became more apparent, a slow, but steady groundswell of Cherokee language use emerged in print, type, and script, even appearing in comics, newspapers, and gift store items. In the 1990s the Cherokee Nation recognized the need to protect the language and did so with the 1991 Language Revitalization Act. The Cherokee Nation recognized the growing problem of language erosion and passed legislation in 1991 to address the problem. Under the act relating to the tribal policy for the promotion and preservation of Cherokee language, history, and culture. Cherokee Nation, 1991, Cherokee and English were finally recognized as the official language of the tribe, providing even more validity and impetus for the literacy as translingual practice. But copyright the Cherokee syllabary, the evolution of writing in Sequoian 91. Use of Cherokee. Cherokees from rural communities might again begin to see the nation's valuing of the language through its use in official functions. The Cherokee Nation would try to use both Cherokee and English when providing services, resources, and information and communicating concerns to members of the Tribal Council. In 2000, the nation conducted a survey of Cherokee language speakers that showed nearly 64% of Cherokee citizens do not speak or understand the language. About 5% understand the language but cannot speak it, 17% understand and have some speaking ability, 3% are conversational, 10% are highly fluent, and only 1% have mastery of the language. Chavez, 2009, p1. It is even more disturbing that so few children raised in homes where Cherokee is the primary language spoken are retaining their language once they enter English-speaking schools. Importantly, though, 95% of the respondents surveyed agreed that ensuring the vitality of the language was important to Cherokee identity and heritage. Chavez, 2009. This suggests that the language is valued as part of identity and heritage, that language loss is an important issue to address in order to maintain Cherokee peoplehood, and that those Cherokees who still speak, read, and write the language are valued assets. With these alarming statistics, the Cherokee Nation developed a Cherokee immersion school, privileged the Cherokee language in their public communications, and developed several K-12 programs through their co-partner Johnson O'Malley program. These policies and programs, along with the proliferation of new media, have again made Sequoian and Cherokee language use possible across more contexts and for more purposes, though the language might still be characterized as endangered at the Stage 6 level. Fishman, as cited in Rayner 2007, pages 88 to 109, where there is some intergenerational use of the language. Digital media have also afforded a closer linking of the sounds, uses, practices, and values of the language with the writing system that so closely represents it. Syllabary charts that still use the one standardized by Worcester link an audio file with the sound of the glyph that plays when users click on each character. Digital videos can be found on the Cherokee Nation website where children's books in Cherokee are read aloud and where Cherokee songs and prayers are coupled with images. To be certain, these digital remediations do not replace the need for more contexts in which Cherokee can be used meaningfully. Cherokee language learners learn best in contexts that are real or at least realistic and in processing content of high interest to them. Rayner and Tennant, 1995, pages 294 to 295. Nevertheless, digital
videos can be found on the Cherokee Nation website where children's books in Cherokee are read aloud, where Cherokee songs and prayers are coupled with images. I want to know. I need to know. It's online. It's online. I can look it. I can Google it. Can I Google it? Oh. Language department. Um, the Cherokee language is considered a class IV4 language in its degree of difficulty in terms of spoken form. The Cherokee syllabary is the written form of the language. It is not an alphabet, but instead contains 85 distinct characters that represent the full spectrum of sounds used to speak Cherokee, one character for each discrete syllable. There we go. A variety of services, including translation and other teaching materials. Where are the teaching materials? I want to see, where are the teaching materials? I'm very learning materials, maybe. A language learning software offered by public libraries. That's pretty cool. Coloring sheets for children, coloring books and storybooks written in Cherokee. I want to see, like, they said videos, and I want to see, like, a video. It's all downloads. Oh no. I don't know if I want to download anything. But yeah, this is really cool. Actually. Mango languages, free software. Must be processed through though not all public libraries offer Mango languages. Let's see. Mango languages. Libraries. How beyond library? I guess I'd have to go to my public library and find out. But that's really cool. Cherokee.org website if you're interested in looking this up. It's not like directly related, right? I mean, it is directly related, but it's not like the subject of the article. But at the same time, if they say that there's a digital source out there, we're gonna look at it. I think. Language classes, adult immersion classes. What's an adult immersion classes? Teach individuals the basics. Community Cherokee classes. The public within the nation's tribal jurisdiction. Free online Cherokee language classes that are open to the public. Like, anybody could go learn this language, I guess. I mean, that's kind of cool. Fonts and keyboards. A list of common Cherokee fonts for use on computers. Keyboard installers. That's really cool. Okay, let's go back. Let's go. Oh, wrong one. Reading Rainbow. Reading Rainbow. We had to go through the whole entire list of all the things to get to the one we wanted to get to. Okay.
Digital remediations do help reinforce the ways in which the Cherokee syllabary itself might be helpful in seeing and hearing the relationship of syllables to meaning, if learners are made aware of the instrumentality of Sequoian. Two key heuristics can be drawn from tracing the evolution of the Cherokee syllabary. 1. Knowledge of the English writing system interferes with learning Sequoian. Example: the habit of seeing R as looking like the letter R, as in /Robert/. Literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Fran. Copyright 92 Ellen Cushman. Which hinders Cherokee learners from reading its Cherokee sound /sv/, and 2. The original learners of this system were all fluent Cherokee speakers who were learning to read and write in their first language, suggesting they would have understood the semantic potential of each character when used in relation to others. Writing systems scholar Daniels, 2009, and anthropologist Bender, 2002, suggested the morphographical nature of the Cherokee syllabary. This research confirms their hypotheses through linguistic analysis of the writing system, qualitative data, and historical evidence. Cushman, 2010, 2011b, 2011c. Implications. My goal with this brief history of the Cherokee writing system has been to tell the story of a writing system developed in resistance to alphabetic scripts, in an effort to remove the alphabetic lens that for so long has obscured the instrumental workings and cultural logics of Sequoian. The instrumentality of the Cherokee syllabary is remarkable for its economy, depth, and flexibility. It represents, with fewer exceptions than alphabetic writing in English, the sound system in the language in just 85 characters. It can potentially codify 3 levels of linguistic information, and it reproduces well no matter what the medium. As opposed to understanding the Cherokee writing system through an alphabet-centric perspective, Harris, 2009, an alphabetic lens, Baca, 2008, or a value system that maintains a hierarchy of signs, Cushman, 2011d, this research changes the terms of the discussion. This work asks us to understand writing as including more than the letter, alphabet, and literacy. It asks us to consider the evolution of indigenous writing technologies happening in spite of and alongside a predominant script that has naturalized our monolinguistic assumptions about knowledge, meaning, and rhetoric. It asks us to re-examine the limited and limiting meaning-making potential of alphabetic orthographies in order to better understand and accommodate graphisms, world Englishes, and hybrid codes. Equally important to correcting the scholarly record about the Cherokee syllabary, this evolutionary history of the Cherokee syllabary has potential heuristic value for language preservation efforts for the Cherokee language. The extent to which a writing system, especially one based on an alphabetic orthography, might aid in language preservation efforts geared towards stabilizing an indigenous language has been a matter of some debate. Morgans, 2009, the bearer of this letter traces the Fort Belknap Indian community resistance to the introduction of any alphabetically based orthographies to codify their language. Burnaby, 2007, has written at length on the status of Indigenous language preservation efforts across Canada and the U.S., finding that writing in orthographies that are alphabetically based has produced mixed and unpromising results in Indigenous communities. Bauman suggests many such academic writing systems are not practical for community use, as cited in Burnaby, 2007, p. 29, in the Introduction to Stabilizing Indigenous Languages, Cantoni, 2007, Presence. Literacy as translingual practice, between copyright, the Cherokee syllabary, the evolution of writing in Sequoian 93. A list of misperceptions that plague current practices in stabilizing indigenous languages, among them being the idea that writing a language is what keeps it alive, p. 6. Rather than seeing the development of a writing system as a central facet of indigenous language preservation and revitalization, writing needs to be viewed along many other community-based language practices. Stabilizing an endangered language, Rayner, 2007, finds, touches all aspects of a community from child-rearing practices and intergenerational communication to economic and political development, p. 4. Writing in indigenous languages needs to be practiced in all aspects of community life within contexts, genres, and purposes that are meaningful and, oftentimes, in exclusion of English. Because writing pedagogy works best when it is nested in talk, endangered languages have a stronger chance of survival when talk and writing with indigenous systems happen together and often. If Cherokee language learners and scholars can view the Cherokee syllabary outside of an alphabetic bias and can continue to develop more practices and purposes for writing, hope remains for the Cherokee language. Finally, the evolution of the Cherokee syllabary fuels the productive line of research called for in the translingual approach to writing research and pedagogy. The translingual approach argues for 1. Honoring the power of all language users to shape language to specific ends, 2. Recognizing the linguistic heterogeneity of all users of language both within the United States and globally, and 3. Directly confronting English monolingualist expectations by researching and teaching how writers can work with and against, not simply within, those expectations. Horner, Liu, Royster, and Trimber, 2011, p. 305. Sequoian shaped the Cherokee language and national identity in and on Cherokee terms, which, to date, have not been well documented in histories of American lit. Literacy. The Cherokee developed this writing system to write the Cherokee language alongside, and in spite of, the predominance of the English language in literacy. Sequoia's invention allowed Cherokees to confront head-on the imperialist agendas that privileged the development of alphabetic orthographies to encode native languages. With a translingual approach, this research helps shift the paradigm of literacy studies, enabling researchers to think more completely through the modes and scripts through which meaning is encoded, adding to the several strands of research developed on multilingual writers. Kana Garaja, 2006a, 2006b, Matsuda, 2006, and Code Meshing, Michael Luna and Kanagaraja, 2007. In the global world and in the multicultural United States, literacy, that is fluency with the letter, cannot be the only object of study for scholars of reading and writing. As this example of the evolution of Sequoian demonstrates, scripts have historical, cultural, linguistic, and ideological import for the people who use them. Research on scripts and multilingualism provide useful correctives to scholarship based on monolingual assumptions, which presume alphabetic literacy and instrumentality as a baseline against which all other scripts and meaning-making activities are judged. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis Group, 2013. ProQuest eBook Central. Copyright 294 Ellen Cushman. Notes. 1. The American Board of Commissions of Foreign Missionaries remarks upon the civilizing force of the Cherokee writing system at the moment it moves from script to print. Among the Cherokees, also, we see established the FIRST regularly elected government, the Christian religion recognized and protected by the government, regular and exempt.
Okay, so then a useful corrective to scholarship based on monolingual assumptions, which presume alphabetic literacy and instrumentality as a baseline against which all other scripts and meaning-making activities are judged. Okay. Mic drop. That one? I like that one. Which is, I know, that's such a bland thing, a bland response, but sometimes, sometimes it's okay. We're making lukewarm cakes here. I like that one, and that's a lukewarm cake, and that's okay. Hi, or hi. Hi, or hi. Translingual practices from Lebanon and mainstream literacy education.
The Code-Mesh title is illustrative of the challenge of representing translingual relations that most fully capture the complexity of language interactions as Lebanese language users negotiate tensions between different communication. The unconventional addition of next to high opens up various possibilities tied to the movement of meanings in this translingual design in light of locally constructed social relations, meanings that I will explore in a later section in this chapter. A translingual approach to language difference in writing, as advanced by Horner, Liu, Royster, and Trimber, 2011, embraces the variety, fluidity, intermingling, and changeability of languages and language practices, p. 301. The current chapter answers the calls of Horner et al.'s 2011 position statement for advancing a translingual approach in U.S. writing programs. With perspectives from the specific location of Lebanon, I adopt a translingual approach to linguistic practices in that site, both on the street and in educational settings, in order to tease out the strategies both language users and literacy laborers adopt in the face of residual monolingual ideologies in various domains of life. Local language practices in Lebanon, as I will demonstrate, do indeed prove the validity of seeing English as a language always in translation, as Pennycook, 2008, puts it, and as emerging in response to linguistic, cultural, historical, geopolitical, and economic relations of difference. Through a description of translingual language relations in Lebanese socio-linguistic landscapes and how these get, or do not get, translated into curricular design, I demonstrate that the productivity of efforts towards institutionalizing translingualism in mainstream literacy pedagogy largely depends on laboring over the close alignment of writing curricula with the specificity of socio-linguistic landscaping. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis Group, 2000 and Copyright Hi or Hi. 97. Language Relations, Sociolinguistic Landscapes and Curricular Design. English and Other Languages on the Ground. Lebanon is a multilingual nation with a dynamic use of Arabic, French, and English that serves basic communicative, vocational, and educational purposes. Point 1. An oral Lebanese Arabic variety, used for conducting daily affairs, and a written modern standard Arabic version, used only in formal domains, coexist among its discourse communities. While traveling in various Lebanese social circles, it is not uncommon to hear the conversation in public spaces easily mesh Lebanese Arabic with English and French. Sections on basic Lebanese, Arabic phrases that interactive online travel guides provide are particularly illustrative of such local language practices. In its Lebanese Arabic phrase book, for instance, WikiTravel helpfully advises tourists to use an English, Lebanese Arabic, French mixture of sorry, wine il toilette? For excuse me, where is the bathroom, should they need to find a bathroom. It also instructs hungry foreigners and tourists to inquire whether a Lebanese bar provides snacks using 3 and kun bar snacks. 4. Do you have bar snacks? 2. In citing these examples and the ones that follow, my purpose is not to use them simply to conduct an enumeration of languages, but rather to illustrate, using a spatio-temporal lens, the complexity of translingual language practices on the ground. Pennycook, 2010, pages 10, 97. I argue, following Pennycook's 2010 calls for the exigence for a qualitative understanding of the traffic of meaning instead of a quantitative strategy towards linguistic diversity, p. 68, that such local language practices
quantitative. Quantitative versus qualitative. Okay, qualitative understanding of the traffic of meaning instead of a quantitative strategy towards linguistic diversity. Ooh, I highlighted that in yellow. I didn't mean to. Okay, so in previous week's readings, right, we've been talking about is there value? Is there any kind of essential value? Which we lean away from essentialism, so you already know what it's going to be. Is there any kind of essential value in code meshing? Not really. Code meshing for the sake of code meshing is not, it's just another kind of language, right? When a person deliberately makes a deliberate rhetorical decision to code mesh, that's when it's value. That's where the value comes from. That's where the agency comes from. Deliberate rhetorical choices. So a qualitative understanding of the traffic of meaning, right? I am deliberately choosing to code mesh. And this is my rhetorical choice. This is my rhetorical exigence. It's a lovely word. I love exigence as a word. It's a beautiful word. The qualitative understanding of the traffic of meaning instead of a quantitative strategy towards linguistic diversity. So it's not, tokenized diversity. It's qualitative understanding of the traffic. We are qualitatively improving the conversation. We are behaving deliberately. We are behaving intentionally. Ooh, 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 ooh. No?
Practices resemble glossodiversity or the diversity of languages as well as semiodiversity or the diversity within language, i.e. the diversity of meanings, p. 100. A close look at language relations in the cosmopolitan capital city Beirut transports you into the spatiality of language and the way language users from all areas of life put their cultural and linguistic resources into action as day-to-day affairs on the street are being conducted, and into the temporality of language through the process of sedimentation emerging from pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial history. This sense of flow in language use, as described by Pennycook, characterizes ongoing language sediment through creative, thoughtful repetitions over time and across space. A representative demonstration of the process of relocalization and creation of semiodiversity in the contemporary Lebanese society is the local language practice of attaching the Arabic dual number suffix ein, in response to French or English greetings, such as in bonjourain, 2 bonjours to you, bonsoirain, 2 bonsoirs, hi ein, 2 highs, or hello ein, 2 hellos. This widespread translingual practice was mainly started by taxi drivers in the city as a sign of Lebanese hospitality and generosity to tourists, or even
That's
courtesy
kind
to
of
national
cute.
citizens.
That's like kind of really like two hellos. Like not just hello, but like super hello, ultra hello. That's cute as shit. I love that.
Citizens, Laser Films, 2010. Aligned with a Lebanese tradition of giving with profusion and literacy as translingual practice. Copyright 98 Nancy Bou Ayash. With a famous Lebanese saying that more of everything never hurt anyone, this numerical representation in the greeting where the person at the receiving end is not merely greeted with one salutation but two is conveyed through a high rising intonation with a distinctive elongated final syllable signifying a welcoming gesture. These idiosyncratic linguistic designs are distinguished from their more monolingual counterparts such as bonjour, bonsoir, hi, and hello, not only in form but also in their unique meaning as a representation of a different kind of interpersonal relations between language users. Western, colonial languages of English and French in this relocalized language practice are deterritorialized into the microspace of the cab driver as a mesopolitical action mediating between broader social, cultural, and linguistic structures on one hand and more local activity on another. Pennycook, 2010, p. 29. Actively intervening with the dominant trade model, the driver's language creation reverses the power relations between lab, owner and buyer of labor through establishing the identity of its user, not only as a driver but also as a host in relation to riders. In this way, a Lebanese driver doesn't need to ask his guests relaxing in the back of his cab, "Do you mind if I talk to you?" anymore, and is rather empowered by his relocalized greeting to impart his own world views, lived experiences, and acquired wisdom on them. In a culture that adopts an iconic greeting of hi, CAVA, pronounced as hi, kifak, CAVA, the equivalent for hi, how are you doing? Are you fine? What I'll refer to as mix and match language practices, with all three languages meshed together, in daily communication are widely accepted and even expected in Lebanese society. This translingual greeting became initially popular among the young population as a distinctive marker of high social class and education through replacing the monolingual Lebanese Arabic greeting marhaba, the French salat, or the English hi that are inadequate for the intended type of meaning. Full social relations. Resorting to mixed and matched options of hi, kifak, CAVA, not only helps Lebanese youth mark generational and class differences but also perform a modern, hybrid identity more aligned with the transcultural and translingual flows in the cosmopolitan Beirut culture, thereby resisting the more singular, fixed, and compartmentalized identities that the monolingual greetings impart. Repetitions of this linguistic construction over time have generated new meanings of subversion to elitism as it is currently used among different social groups to symbolize national identity and authenticity. The relocalization of this language practice in space and time is a reflection of newness, renewal, and difference, or what Pennycook labels as fertile mimesis, 2010, p. 37.
Fertile mimesis, that's another one that's in another article or another chapter, fertile mimesis. I forget what that means. What does that mean? What does it mean? Fertile mimesis. It is when sedimentation, right? Sedimentation. New things are happening every day, and we're just piling on top of the things, and that means things are changing. Things are changing because things are happening. I like that. That's a good one. Things are changing because things are happening.
Kifak and CAVA, the English hi generates new social and cultural relations between its language users that mark them as different and Lebanese, with full ownership of their daily language use, meaningful relations not captured by an English-only construction. To appreciate more fully the dynamic use of language resources by ordinary language users, I consider in the next section one aspect of the macro context of local language practices, which is the educational and the ideological landscape informing and informed by such practices. Literacy as translingual practice, between community. Copyright Hi or Hi. 99. Writing instruction and translation 3. The past couple of years have witnessed new efforts among a number of professional writing teachers to redesign writing assignments in ways that further promote cross-language relations in their writing classrooms. Several instructors of international business writing and technical communication courses have acknowledged the importance of translating the linguistic realities and challenges of cross-border exchanges in local and global relations in the business world into their own classrooms through encouraging the process of composing business and technical documents in Arabic and French alongside English. On an instructional level, my personal experience working with such translingual writing assignments in my technical writing courses, which are a requirement for students majoring in engineering, architecture, and graphic design, proved to be a great opportunity for students to examine the use of their native language in the world of marketing and business in a fast, capitalist world amid the hegemony of English. Such discussions led to unsolicited explorations of stylistic structures that incorporate the unwritten vernacular using the standard Arabic calligraphy or Latin encoding, what is commonly known as transliteration, with special symbols used to replace the missing phonemes as in the motto of a popular Lebanese industry campaign Bit 7 EB Lebanon 7 EB Sina 3-4 If you love Lebanon, love its local products. 4 Conversations about such relocalized language practices that were carried over from instant messaging and social networking into the advertisement domain encouraged a critical examination of the wide range of literate practices available to multilingual Lebanese students both inside and outside the writing classroom, such as decisions about when, how, and why they resort to translingual options like hi, sia va, or hi-ein. Though the diverse language situation in Lebanon has found its way into professional writing classrooms, academic writing teachers are still very hesitant to encourage cross-language relations in their own writing pedagogies. Strong justifications from the push of the job market in Lebanon have empowered only professional writing teachers for pursuing translingual work, but the dominance of monolingual ideologies in the academic knowledge market in Lebanon as well as internationally has kept those in the academic realm clinging to conformity to standardized rules and prescribed writing conventions. Educators and academics are constantly pressured by the allegedly universal demands of educational and job opportunities over the reproduction of language standards when the professional world is
pressured by the allegedly universal demand of educational and job opportunities over the reproduction of language standards when the professional world is in reality much less stringent than they like to acknowledge. Ooh. Just gonna highlight that. Leave it there,
in reality, much less stringent than they like to acknowledge,
Oof.
and they in turn transport dominant conceptions about such ostensibly necessary prerequisites for social and personal development to their students. A key point of interest here is the precedence of the professional realm over the academic, particularly in revising and adapting curriculum design and pedagogy for closer alignment with prevailing translingualism in socio-linguistic and business landscapes. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and copyright 100 Nancy Bouayash. Similar ideological differences can be observed even in applied translation courses that are designed to capture the politics of translingual meaning-making. 51 Introductory translation course is offered by the Department of Arabic and Near Eastern Languages and mostly involves English, Arabic translation. As stated in the syllabus, work in this course is conducive to a better understanding of both languages, and of the ways they interact, in the translation context and to a critical engagement with the static lexical and otherwise dynamic meanings in various compositions. Course syllabus, Arabic 225, translation, March 1, 2011. With translation viewed as the first step towards cultural cross-pollination, the course is described as an opportunity to explore the intricacies of both languages together, or the fundamentals of one through the understanding of the intricacies of the other. However, such translingual work remains hindered by dominant expectations for a finished, monolingual product and insistence on standardized versions. With emphasis on the significance of the mastery of the fundamentals, the course syllabus portrays appeals to traditional language standards AE aesthetic through warning against translated products that corrupt language, talent, and taste. We, the citizens of universities, are the guards of proper understanding and correct communication. We cannot trade in incomprehensible texts that corrupt language, talent, and taste. We shall therefore approach translation as an academic enterprise governed by criteria of correctness and precision. Course syllabus, Arabic 225, translation, American.
We, the citizens of universities, are the guards proper understanding and correct communication. We cannot trade in incomprehensible texts that corrupt language, talent, and taste. We shall therefore approach translation as an academic enterprise governed by criteria of correctness and precision. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy.
American University of Beirut.
Oh boy.
Another translation course, on the other hand, offered by the English department and recently approved as a humanities general education course, allows for a more critical engagement with language standards. This course, as indicated in its syllabus, mainly involves Arabic, English translation activities and is designed to help university students reflect on what they do, how they do it, and why they do it in a particular way when other options are available. Course syllabus, English 233, Introduction to Translation. The theoretical component deemed most relevant to students in this course is that of language in use rather than language as an abstract system of phonemes, morphemes, lexemes, etc.
Ooh, the theoretical component to most relevant to students in this course is that of language in use, rather than language as an abstract system of phonemes, morphemes, lexemes, and the lack of one-to-one correspondence between words and meaning constituents within or across languages. Oh my god. It's like catnip. Catnip. What the Oh, that's a good one. On the multiplicity and ramification of meanings. Do you want rewards or do you want consequences? The multiplicity and ramification of meanings. Oh! Oh, language and use rather than language as an abstract system. Oh. 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 Not just. You know? You know? Mm. Language and why do we make the rhetorical choices we do? Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I have to.
etc. and of the lack of
I
one-to-one
have to. It's
correspondence
just.
between words and meaning constituents within or across languages, with focus on the multiplicity and ramification of meanings instead. This course encourages students to negotiate their way through literary, non-literary, multimodal, and multimedia texts with constant negotiations of tensions between the multiplicity of discourses, genres, languages, and language practices. Such differences in the commitment level to translingualism in various translation courses speak directly to the residual force of monolingual ideologies seeping even into heavily based translingual work. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Copyright High or High. 101. Implications for Mainstream Literacy Pedagogy. What exactly does an actively translingual site like Lebanon in its daily lived experiences and business transactions and some pockets of educational institutions have to offer mainstream literacy pedagogy? In light of perspectives from a statistically and culturally sustained translingual space, local socio-linguistic and business landscaping, which are fertile grounds for translingual language practices, are generally neglected sites of language use in many academic contexts that need to be addressed more aggressively in curriculum planning and design. Involving a high frequency of trafficking across meanings, genres, disciplines, languages, and language practices, the local specificity of socio-linguistic and business landscaping is situated in stark opposition with the stringency of the academic world, also see Tupas, 2006, thereby challenging the intrinsic value of monolingual practices. Primarily accorded by academia. The nature of language relations characterizing the business landscaping and day-to-day experiences is in itself an asset that calls for compositionists' close attention, particularly in pursuing more translingual work in writing programs and writing classrooms. Texts from various areas of life, including digital composing spaces, can be used as interactive course materials for highlighting processes of relocalization in every act of reading and writing and for engaging students of business and technical writing courses or even first-year composition courses in prolific translingual work. Laboring with, on, and across, not just within, English and other languages and critically engaging with the politics and problematics of translation is the dream of many literacy specialists and composition teachers. Pennycook, 2010, argues that the language teaching enterprise, and I would add writing instruction, is indelibly tied to translation and the diversity of meanings, p. 141, see also Cramsch. 2006, among the globally exploding influences of the hegemony of English are its unnatural promotion of monolingual ideologies amid actively multilingual societies and its eschewal of the productivity of imagining literacy instruction as a project of translation, Pennycook, 2008, p. 43. There is a growing need to continue vigilantly fighting monolingualist ideologies, see Kanagaraja, 2006, Horner and Liu, 2009, Horner and Trimber, 2002, Horner et al., 2011, particularly in course design, through institutionalizing courses in translation theory and practice similar to those offered in Lebanon, in addition to weaving in work of translation across languages, language practices, disciplines, and genres into existing professional and academic writing curricula. Designing translation assignments with attention to the politics of meaning-making for writing students who are constantly composing, thinking, and living their daily lives in translation lies at the heart of translingualism and is a necessary start for any writing classroom. As writing teachers, we can start by bringing translation to the forefront in writing pedagogy, through integrating translation activity into existing writing courses for an enhanced awareness among our students of the dynamic interaction between English, other languages, and the language practices inevitably occurring in their literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classroom. Copyright 2013. Taylor and Francis Group. All rights reserved. 102 Nancy Boo Ayash. Daily Encounters. A translingual writing classroom then foregrounds the creation of semiodiversity or the multiplicity of meanings on top of glossodiversity. Acknowledgements. I would like to thank Dr.
Translingual writing classroom then foregrounds the creation of semiodiversity or the multiplicity of meanings on top of glossodiversity. Glossodiversity. What does that mean? I don't know. Let's go. Tongue of words or language. Okay, so we have glosso is of words or language. So a diversity of language. Translingual writing classroom foregrounds the creation of semiodiversity, multiplicity of meanings on top of glossodiversity. So we're not just learning more words. We're also learning more ways to create words, more creations of words. I don't know. More meaning making. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that one too. That was pretty interesting. I mean that's and that's not like the end all be all of the analysis, but at the same time, it is like I am tired. And I kind of want to get to the last one. Translingual practices in Kenyan hip hop, pedagogical implications. You've heard of K-pop, but now it's K-hip hop. You know, I feel like I'm gonna get canceled for that. Guys, it was just a bad joke. Anyways.
Introduction. In the essay Towards a Mestiza Rhetoric, Gloria Anzaldúa on Composition and Postcoloniality, Lunsford, 2009.
Oh, this is the one that I mentioned the very first day. On the very first day, didn't we? We talked about this on the very first day. Gloria Anzaldúa. I tried so hard to say. I should have just looked up like shit. But, whatever. It's fine. In her essay, we're just gonna let her read it.
2009 laments that the field of composition studies has not done enough to help writing instructors promote language diversity and multiculturalism in their classrooms.
Why are you
In her
so
essay,
aggressive?
which is based on an interview with Gloria Anzaldúa, both scholars concur that the field's lack of concerted effort to promote language and cultural diversity has worked to disadvantage monolingual American students. This is because the students not only fail to recognize the language and cultural diversity of others, but their very own diversity. Anzaldúa proposes one way of helping monolingual students recognize their diversity is by jerking them out into another country where they don't speak the language, they don't know the food. It's like taking a fish out of water.
Okay, that was a joke. That was a joke. But we are talking. Okay, here we go. Anzaldúa proposes one way of helping monolingual students recognize their diversity is by. Oh no, wait. No. This is because the students not only fail to recognize the language and cultural diversity of others, but their very own diversity. Yeah, it's the language of the poggers. You fail to recognize the language of the poggers. You fail to recognize it. We're gonna highlight that because it's important. There is diversity, even in monolingualism. Because language is not static. Language involves sedimentation.
In Lunsford, 2009, p. 1413. An exposure to difference, she argues, will enable students to recognize the multiple voices, linguistic, cultural, and rhetorical identities they embody. In this chapter I heed Anzaldua's proposal. I argue that writing teachers need to explore diverse cultures to theorize pedagogies to teach language diversity. I propose global hip-hop, or sci-fi, as one of the cultural sites that can offer
Global hip-hop. We're just gonna Google it. We're gonna Google it. I want to see some examples. What is global hip-hop? What is global hip-hop? Global Hip-Hop Studies is a peer-reviewed, rigorous, and community-responsive academic journal. No. What is hip-hop a global culture? Hip-hop is both a global and local form. Hip-hop culture, especially music, is so malleable that consumers can find in it different meanings. Global hip-hop diaspora, understanding the culture. When did hip-hop become global? The 90s. By 1979, hip-hop music had become a mainstream genre. It spread across the world in the 1990s with controversial gangsta rap. How did hip-hop spread globally? Not long after its birth in the 70s, hip-hop spread like wildfire around the world, with imitation and replication as a central facilitator of this dispersal and cross-pollination of musical and lyrical styles. Syncopated geography of hip-hop. Ooh. That's That's a nice title. That's a good title. I don't know who titled that, but that's a good title. That is a good title. Some words are just really nice words. Really nice words. Syncopated, syncopation. Oh yeah, that's a good word. That's a good word. What was the impact of hip hop? The global influence of hip hop culture has shaped music styles, fashion, technology, art, entertainment, language, dance, education, politics, media, and more. To this day, hip hop continues to be a global phenomenon, developing new art forms that impact the lives of new and old generations. Why is it called hip hop? Originating in the South Bronx in the late 70s, hip hop went global by the end of the 80s. So, how did it get its name? According to one explanation, the term pairs the hip, that means trendy or fashionable, with the leaping movement hop. Really? From Merriam-Webster Dictionary, words at play. I don't know. I'm not a hip hop expert. I'm just, me.
Students, the kind of stimulation Anzaldua conceptualizes. While my definition of global hip-hop, or sci-fi...
What does sci-fi mean? I'm assuming that it's like a very specialized term. Maybe, I don't know. Sci-fi population health management platform. That's not it. Sci-fi sounds, American DJ, comedian. Nope, that's not it. Sci-fi urban dictionary. To decipher, to create a cryptic way of arranging something, perhaps to conceal its real meaning. That's from the Urban Dictionary, which fits my original, very highly specific, term. Unironically, it does fit my highly specific discourse term definition. Yeah. Or sci-fi also includes U.S.-based hip hop. Okay, so why don't we look up hip hop sci-fi? The Global Sci-Fi Hip Hop Culture and Consciousness. That's a book. It's a book. It's a book. This book presents in-depth conversations with hip-hop artists from around the world, representing the many regional scenes of the U.S. from the East Coast of the Bay Area to the Dirty South. This is the Amazon page. We're gonna go, Amazon page. Oh, never mind. Which one is it? Let's try to find it on Goodreads. Paste and go. Oh, nope. There we go. No, thank you. First book about hip-hop culture to present in-depth conversations with artists from around the world, representing the many regional scenes in the U.S. We already read this. As well as diverse forms of street music, such as reggaeton, reggae dancehall, shabby, and Rye. Conversations with Jay-Z, Mos Def, Eve, Sean Paul, Young, Jeezy, Fox Brown, Booba, Uju Banton, Ivy Queen, Africa Bambata, Sonia Sanchez, DJ Cool, Herc, lots of names. Pitbull. Demonstrate, and many others, demonstrate these artists to be critical interpreters of their own culture and of the world around them. Here's a book that centers the usually marginalized voices of hip hop communities, presenting a remarkably refreshing and revealing view of hip hop culture from the inside out. Enter the global cipher. So, okay. I think this gives us, I do, or cipher. So yeah, I think this is giving us, the cipher. This is, nobody's reviewed this book. Too bad. It's a 4.4. That's a pretty decent rating, I feel. That's a pretty decent Goodreads rating. So yeah, we have another internet resource. You can go check that book out. Either from your local library or you can buy it. I don't know. I wonder if they have it at the library. That'd be an interesting thing to look up. I'm not going to do that right now though because it's late. Anyway, I want to get through this. Okay.
Sci-fi also includes U.S. based hip-hop. Here, I encourage teachers to consider more than ever before teaching with and about hip-hop from other parts of the world, in addition to U.S. hip-hop. I make this recommendation based on the assumption that, in the past, many hip-hop pedagogies applied in U.S. written classrooms have been theorized and exclusively relied on U.S. based hip-hop, particularly African American hip-hop. Like Ibrahim, 2009, I argue that hip-hop from other parts of the world is rich and unique in the sense that it is character. Literacy as translingual practice, between communities and copyright translingual practices in Kenyan hip-hop, pedagogical implications 105. Ized by musical, cultural, and linguistic creolization or métissage. Métissage, he explains, assumes two or more cultural entities that are equally valorized, hence it is egalitarian hybridity, where ambiguity, multiplicity, fragmentation, and plurality become the new landscape, p. 233. Kenyan hip-hop, which is used in this chapter to theorize a translingual pedagogy, is characterized by hybridization of hip-hop, dancehall, reggae, and traditional African music forms. At the language level, the artists cross Kenyan language boundaries to include many non-indigenous languages. Other common languages used include African American language, AAL, and Caribbean-based languages such as Jamaican Patois and Dread Talk. The interaction of multiple and diverse cultures, music genres, and language.
Dread Talk? What does that mean? The language of the Rastafari. Oh, okay. Oh, there's a book. Red Talk examines the effects of Rastafarian language on Creole in other parts of the Caribbean, its influence in Jamaican poetry, its effects in standard American English. Okay. That could be that sounds like an interesting book actually. They have a review of it in Project Muse. Or okay, let's. Keep going.
Languages is, according to Ibrahim, 2009, an indicator of how hip-hop outside the United States emphasizes and engages in a dialectic relation between the global and the local, a point that some U.S-based hip-hop is yet to fully understand. p. 236. The linguistic situation of Kenyan hip-hop. Kenya is a very linguistically diverse nation. There are three major indigenous speaking groups in the country, the Kushites, the Bantu, and the Nilotes. Under these three broad categories are over 40 indigenous languages. Kiswahili and English are recognized as the country's official and national languages. English, introduced in Kenya through the British colonization, is privileged as the official language of instruction and business. Kiswahili, also called Swahili, is a mandatory and examinable subject in elementary and secondary schools. In addition, Kiswahili serves as the main language of interethnic communication, and is also spoken regionally in several countries in East and Sub-Saharan Africa. Because of the popularity of Kiswahili and English, the two are now becoming the preferred languages for many, especially in Kenya's urban cities. Consequently, this has influenced and shaped the language of Kenyan hip-hop, in that English and Kiswahili are the main, or base, languages of composition, arguably aimed at reaching a wider national, regional, and international audience. Some artists incorporate Kenya's indigenous languages in their compositions. However, one should note that, even though the composing is mainly done in Kiswahili and English, the artists are by no means adhering to the standard grammar rules of either language. Defying the language's rules has been made possible through a translanguaging practice referred to as Sheng, which I briefly discuss below. Sheng as a translingual discourse. To appreciate translingual practices in Kenyan hip-hop,
Sheng.
one has to understand the languaging practices of Sheng because they significantly shape the identity of Kenyan hip-hop. Sheng has been defined and described by linguists as the mixing of several languages in spoken and, to some extent, written communication. In his Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Class, copyright 106 Esther Malou. Extensive study on Sheng, Kithinji, 2006, established that Sheng means different things to different people in Kenya. Perhaps the varied interpretations and meanings arise from one notable finding of his study, that is, Sheng defies all the established rules that govern the definitions of a language, a dialect, pidgin, Creole, jargon, and slang. Because of this fluidity, his study concluded, a critical look at Sheng shows that while it does display aspects of all these linguistic categories, it cannot conclusively be classified into any of them without raising problems of definition. p. 43. A common Kenyan understanding of Sheng is that it is a strategy of switching and mixing of languages, and also a language in its own right, that is, a hybrid linguistic code for Kenyan urban youth. Abdulaziz and Asand, 1997, Githiora, 2002, Ogaki, 2005, Spiropoulos, 1987. From a historical viewpoint, these studies posit that Sheng emerged from the densely populated multilingual Kenyan urban centers as result of mixing of English and Swahili. Sheng thus became the second facilitator of interethnic communication among the youth, allowing them to switch and borrow from either language if they felt limited in terms of proficiency in using either Swahili or English. Momanyi, 2009, notes that, while this was initially the case, today Sheng crosses language boundaries to include other languages in its construction. A number of authors have argued that Sheng adopts Swahili language structure. With Kiswahili being a Bantu language, Ogaki, 2005, coined the term Bantuization to refer to a process where words whose syllables do not follow the primitive Bantu syllable structure of consonant, vowel, CV, are manipulated or adjusted to fit the structure. According to Ogaki, 2005, words borrowed from a non-Bantu language have to be first Bantuized to become Sheng. To demonstrate this process, a word like Mababi in the song Bomba by Easier, K-Rupt, and Big Pin, 2001, track 3, is borrowed from the word Babylon. The word is truncated to Babi and a prefix ma is added to it to create a new word Mababi, singular Mbabi or Babi. The newly formed word, Mababi, means oppressors or people in power in Kenyan context, especially the police or political elite. Mababi has also been used to refer to the West or imperialists. The word Babylon, which is the name of the ancient city of Mesopotamia, and historically associated with corruption and the persecution of Jews, has, over the years entered the lexicon of the Rastafarian movement and culture to refer to corrupt government personalities, institutions, or systems. Babylon is now part of Jamaican dancehall and reggae lexicon, two music forms that have greatly influenced Kenyan hip-hop. Richard Sun, 2006, observes that these two music forms are influenced by Rasta ideology and symbology. Thus, Kenyan hip-hop artists borrowed and reinvented the word Babylon by linguistically repurposing it through Sheng to fit a Kenyan localized reality and worldview. This example demonstrates not only Sheng's languaging practices but also how diverse linguistic,
Languaging.
cultural, and music creolization shapes the language practices of Kenyan hip-hop artists. However, because of Sheng's fluidity, Kenyan hip-hop artists continue to challenge fixed rules like Bantuization, as they come up with new languaging. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis Group, Copyright 2013. Empowering Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classroom, Copyright 2000 and Translingual Practices in Kenyan Hip-Hop, Pedagogical Implications 107. Practices every day. In this chapter, I argue that Sheng as a translingual practice allows artists to manipulate a variety of languages for their diverse purposes, and in ways that push the linguistic boundaries of the languages involved. Translingualism at the lexical level. Sheng's translingual practices in Kenyan hip-hop occur at different levels. At the lexical level, artists mix two or more languages to form a word, for example, through the Bantuization process described above. Another way is through linguistic inventiveness. An example of this is the word unbwagable in the hip-hop song Who Can Bwago Me? By Giddy Giddy Maji Maji, 2002, track 2. The prefix un and the
Unbwagable. Who can bwago me? Okay.
Luo word bwago, which means to scare or defeat, and the suffix able are combined to form the word unbwagable. Luo is one of the indigenous languages spoken in Kenya under the Nilotic speaking group. To say I am unbwagable means I am unbeatable or I am not scared. Because of the song's mass appeal, it became a campaign anthem and slogan for the then major opposition party, the National Rainbow Coalition, NARC, during Kenya's 2002 general elections. As a campaign tool, the word and its accompanying message had a dramatic influence on Kenya's national politics, contributing significantly to persuading the electorate to end President Mwa's totalitarian leadership of 25 years, and the Kenya African National Union, KANU, party's autonomous rule of 40 years. Linguistic inventiveness as a translanguaging practice reveals the artist's high level of metalinguistic awareness and linguistic creativity, which is conscious of historical, cultural, economic, and socio-political factors. In their critical and rhetorical analysis of the song, Narrow and Ogund, 2005, observed that it is due to the common cultural context rooted in shared experiences that a song like Unbwagable acquires its social agency because it resonates with the political impulses and anxieties of the moment, p. 239. This is one example among many that hip-hop artists come up with every day in their composing and performing practices. Translingualism at morphosyntactical level. The realization of Sheng as translingual form at this level is comparable to what is referred to in linguistic terms as code mixing. Bakamba, 1998, defines code mixing as the embedding or mixing of various linguistic units, i.e., affixes, words, phrases, and clauses from two distinct grammatical systems or subsystems within the same sentence and same speech situation, p. 24. The following excerpt from Hip Hop Halizi by Yaku Flani and Notizig, 2008, Track 1, is an exam PLE of a code mixing of Swahili and English morphemes and clauses in a hip-hop lyrical composition. The excerpt represents a common or the typical case of translingual composing in Kenyan hip-hop. I have highlighted the phrases below to demonstrate the process. A hyphen indicates the point of mixing. Literacy as Translingual Practice, Between Communities and Classrooms, edited by Suresh Kanagaraja, Taylor and Francis, Copyright 108 Esther Malu. Tafad Halai expect First Lady Kwa beat Kama Hai Iki Pump Kwa Ma Streets Ca Nai Robbery Town Tuki represent Washi Na Wadai Wane Ajunga Nami Juyu Hai Sound
Hold on. Expect First Lady beat. Illest. I think like the coolest, right?
Yaku Flani Na Mi Natiza Toka Mau Mau Wape Uhuru Sa Tuko Free Kurok Ma crowds so Wanachiza Nasai Hawaii Katad instead wanna agree that we the ilist asterisk Kwa high crowd Yahweh Zana E that's why Tunakagulawa Na Matin IE. Matin IE. Transcription code, italics Swahili, bold code mixed Swahili and English morphemes, Roman English, asterisk AAL lexicon. The morpheme asterisk I-list in the excerpt above is lexicon borrowed from AAL. AAL, which is a distinct linguistic system with its own lexicon, grammar, and phonological patterns of usage, has been crossing into Kenyan hip-hop. This can be attributed to the influence of African American hip-hop on Kenyan hip-hop, and to the globalization of hip-hop and hip-hop nation language. In addition, AAL syntactical features are prevalent in Kenyan hip-hop. In the song Bomba by Easier, K-Rupt, and Big Pin, 2001, Track 3, the artists use the habit UALB when they rap We Be Partying. Similarly, Yuku Flanny Mau Mau's lyrics are strewn with zero copula syntactical forms.
What is AAL? They? Or from AAI? They might have said. They might have said already, but I'm just gonna look it up just in case, you know. I don't think it's American Airlines, buddy. African American language? Maybe? African American English is AAE. Okay. Ow. Ow.
Forms.
Okay.
For example, in All Over the World, 2004, track 6, They Rap, We Rolling, while in Burn Dem, 2008, track 2, They Rap, We Still Live in This Ghetto Life. The reduction of the final consonant sound to a single sound so that a word like living becomes livin' is also prevalent in Kenyan hip-hop, and is consistent with AAL grammar. The harmonious incorporation of AAL syntactical forms within English, Kiswahili, and Kenyan indigenous languages grammar, is a translanguaging practice. Ludi, 2003, explains this process where rules and norms are activated that overlap single languages and govern the harmonic, i.e. the grammatical mixing of elements from different languages, as cited in Garcia 2008, p. 46. Such a practice allows the artists to mesh more than two languages with distinct syntactic systems in their lyrics, a testament of how two or more languages can be accommodated within the bounds of a single text, Kanagaraja, 2006. In conclusion, the use of multiple languages in Kenyan hip-hop shows the artists' freedom and agency to use all the languages in their repertoire to compose their music.
Freedom and agency. Remember, meanings. Meanings create. What was the last line? What was the last line? It's like the very last line, wasn't it? Let's find it. Let's fucking find it. Foregrounds the creation of a semio-diversity of the multiplicity of meanings on top of glossodiversity. So you don't just know a bunch of languages, right? You are able to create new meanings out of the knowledge that you have, right? The language that you have. Here's that other highlight that we had. Here we go. Theoretical component. Language in use. There we go. That's the language in use rather than language as an abstract system of phonemes, morphemes, lexemes, right? And this is where we see, this is like the theory, right? This is the practice. This is the practical application. This is where you see it in use in your everyday life, right? Turn on the radio, maybe not the radio. I'm gonna pull up the YouTube. I'm gonna search this song and I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna listen to it. And it is something that's happening in my everyday life. Really cool. Freedom and agency to use all languages in their repertoire and compose their music. And they're not just using multiple languages because they can. They are making rhetorical choices, right? To combine the words in the ways they do. To achieve the meaning that they do, right?
Music.
Really cool.
Such a practice is consistent with Kelman's 2000 argument that translinguals move beyond their native languages. Theirs is an aspiration to transcend language in general, to be pandictic, to utter everything, p. 16, on another level.
Hold on. To be pandictic. What does that mean? What does that mean? A single text that comprehends everything. A single text that comprehends everything. An aspiration to translinguals move beyond their native languages. Theirs is an aspiration to transcend language in general, to be pandictic, to utter everything. Ooh. Oh, I love that. New favorite word just dropped. Be pandictic, utter everything. Beautiful.
Level, translanguaging is also a way for the artists to index their post-colonial identities. Omonili, 2009, identifies a number of identities that African rappers have to negotiate through their choice of language encompass. Literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classrooms. Copyright Translingual practices in Kenyan hip-hop, pedagogical implications 109. In their music, nationality, religion, ethnicity, home versus diasporic and global relations and connections, and collaborations with global or US rappers. Omonili sees one function of switching between languages by the rappers is to produce appropriate alignments, stances, or positionings in relation to any of these identities, p. 130. Translanguaging thus allows the artists to index their membership in different discourse communities, local, regional, diasporic, global, and hip-hop nation. Towards a translingual hip-hop pedagogy. A pedagogy inspired by hip-hop would be guided but not limited to the following objectives: 1. To expose students to other cultures, languages, and Englishes; 2. To explore the Afro-dances of multilingual composing; and 3. To develop in students a metalinguistic awareness through critical and a rhetorical analysis of multilingual hip-hop texts. Teachers would need to provide their students with a brief overview of the historical, social, and cultural context of all the languages used. Like in any other class, the learning goals should be designed to equip students with the right values, attitudes, knowledge, and skills about the importance of language in their writing. To facilitate a better understanding of the message in the music, a combination of print, audio, and visual elements of the lyrics is necessary. As Kanagaraja, 2011, observes, a translingual text has an expanded spatial dimension, which invites readers and participants to be sensitive to its visual and aesthetic elements. It is also multimodal and performative in the way it is read and understood. As such, it has an orientation different from a text produced in the autonomous literacy model, p19. Playing hip-hop music videos, along with print texts of the lyrics, gives the students an opportunity to interact and engage creatively with the text. Next, the teacher can have students undertake small group discussions, which can be guided by a number of activities where students identify English lexemes and syntactical forms that are mixed with other languages or that may seem idiosyncratic. Have them discuss how the mixing affects the grammar of languages involved or how it contradicts conventional orthography and pronunciation. Discuss possible reasons why artists may be using several languages in writing their lyrics. Think about purpose and audience and how these may influence an artist's choice.
Think about purpose and audience and how these may influence an artist's choice of. This is what we're talking. This is rhetoric, right?
Choice of a particular language. Do a rhetorical and critical analysis of the hip-hop lyrics to identify the different linguistic strategies employed, such as code mixing, code switching, linguistic borrowing/crossing, and inventiveness. Discuss the opportunities it offers the artists. Discuss and share the possible genres or contexts in which the students do multilingual composing, either consciously or unconsciously. Literacy as translingual practice, between community. Copyright 110 Esther Malou. In this pedagogy, the teacher's roles are the following. To facilitate a dialogue where the entire class shares and reflects on activities arising from the small group discussions, to have students attempt a multilingual composition or write in a language other than their primary one. Implications. A rhetorical or critical analysis of why, when, and how hip-hop artists use multiple languages in their compositions helps students develop a metalinguistic awareness through an understanding that language is not a static thing but is a process and a system with the potential to be manipulated to achieve rhetorical ends. In addition, having students interrogate what is grammatical about some words or having them make sense of the idiosyncratic syntactical forms in the lyrics helps tease out their awareness of other Englishes. A focus on examining what may seem to be grammar and usage errors allows students to critically analyze the creative, critical, and ideological role of grammar. The teacher should facilitate a discussion to help students critically explore whether errors are indeed grammar errors, or whether they are related to another language or hip-hop genre. This is an opportunity to begin questioning the notions of what constitutes standard English and whom it serves. Students. Recognition of the artist's agency to manipulate language helps them realize they too have agency to use language creatively and purposefully and for a range of reasons and in a variety of contexts. Hip-hop exposes students not only to languages and cultures in local communities, but also to a number of world Englishes, such as AAL and Sheng/Kenyan English.
AAL, okay,
Students
so
get an
that's
opportunity to
world
discuss
English.
issues related to the evolution,
A type of
variation,
world
and
English.
fluidity of the English language. This is also an opportunity to learn the historical and social, cultural context of the languages. A study of the Englishes used in Kenyan hip-hop, for example, gives the teacher an opportunity to help students explore the historical, racial, and cultural relationship between Africans, Kenyans, Jamaicans, and African Americans. Students and teachers get an opportunity to learn something about the communities/cultures where these languages spring up. In addition, examining the discrepancy or contradiction in orthography, what is written in the text, and how it is pronounced in the video is intended to shatter the assumption made by teachers and students alike that English is a phonetically regular language. Delpit, 1996, p. 61.
The assumption that English is a phonetically regular language. Does anybody really assume that though? I mean, they're talking about it here, so yeah, people are definitely out there assuming that. Like, but do we really? Do we really? I mean, yeah. But like, come on. I like, come on. Oh.
61. Teachers and students become sensitive to varied pronunciations of particular English forms. Such sensitivity works in reversing the negative attitudes that students and teachers harbor about other people's languages and Englishes. It is my hope that one big takeaway from this discussion would be that instructors can begin to view Global Sci-Fi as a site where they can explore and theorize. Literacy as translingual practice, between communities and classroom. Copyright translingual practices in Kenyan hip-hop, pedagogical implications 111. More pedagogies for teaching language diversity. A translingual hip-hop pedagogy, as shown in this discussion, resists linguistic imperialism and calls for a pluralism in all composing. It also allows multiple languages and stylistic types of both standard and non-standard to mesh in a creative, critical, and productive way. References. Abdulaziz.
Okay. So let's do, last sentence. Translingual hip hop pedagogy, as shown in this discussion, resists linguistic imperialism and calls for a pluralism in all composing. It also allows multiple languages and stylistic types of both standard and non-standard to mesh in a creative, critical, and productive way. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. So that is all 5 texts. As for like the synthesizing, I think we see a lot of overlap. In these. I feel like maybe the overlap was, no, there wasn't. It wasn't. It was just that I was tired, I think, and I'm tired today too. But I was. Oh boy, I was very worn out last time. But yeah, I think we see a lot of overlap in. Let's go back to this. Language in use rather than language as an abstract system, right? And so these texts all exemplify the ways that language is in use, right? The way that language is used to should have part of rhetoric. There, yeah. The way that language is used to create rhetoric. The way that language is a rhetorical choice, right? Language is used to create meaning. Language has no inherent meaning. There's no inherent meaning. There's no inherent meaning to consequences. Consequences is just, a bunch of symbols. But we together agree that consequences generally means a bad thing, even though, by the dictionary definition, it can also be good things. So we choose, when we use consequences, we choose to use it specifically rhetorically, rather than using, rewards. Right? What else? What other things did I highlight? So just look back through the highlight. I didn't highlight much here. Let's see. All languages change over time. So yes, we see sedimentation. Sedimentation in slang. Slang is a form of sedimentation. Elders voice their criticism of the way that young people speak, which may trigger linguistic insecurity on the part of younger imperfect speakers. And that's not just, Navajo, that's, your everyday life. When you think about when, people have criticized the way you spell things, especially online, you spelled a word wrong, therefore your argument is wrong and you must be dumb. You don't really feel good about that. But also, it makes it hard to want to engage with that language. What else? Anything else? I didn't really highlight a lot in this one. Oh, there we go. We got another one. Colonized continue to colonize themselves as they copy the thinking they learned in schools controlled by colonial government. So assimilation. But here, we have, instead of assimilation, we have translingualism, right? We have, instead of speaking one language and picking that one language, we are using language in, diverse, complicated ways. We're guided by rhetoric, right? The first one, guided by rhetoric. And so instead of, just writing in English, or just writing in one language, we mix codes. We code mesh, right? We make new things, new meanings. But even when we're not code meshing, we're still creating new meaning because we are in new situations, new spaces. We have highlighted in this one. Let's find out. Let's see. This constellation of term links reading and writing to the letter, indeed links seemingly all domains of knowledge and knowledge making to literacy. Why did we highlight that? I don't remember when we highlighted that. Let's keep looking. Let's see if there's anything else. Here's another thing. Rhetorical effect for settlers, political leaders. Received. Okay, so then we have combination of this article. We have the civilized because of the alphabet. So written language as a way to legitimize language. But in our process, our attempts to legitimize language, right? Sometimes we forget that language is in use rather than an abstract system. Well, this is what synthesis is, right? We're going through these texts. We're finding the pieces that stand out to us, that are important to us, are meaningful, that are interesting. And we're saying, where do these connect, right? And in this, we are, we are performing a translingual act ourselves because we are taking the words of other people, right? We're taking the words of other people and we are performing the act of synthesis, the act of sedimentation, where we're compiling them on top of one another to make even newer meanings, right? Newer meaning. This is why I love literature. I love language. I love it. Because even as language is a colonizing, brutalizing force, it has the potential, right? Potential. I'm always talking about potentiality. Even though that's probably not a word. Don't look it up. I don't want to know. It's now it's a word. We've made it a word. Because it's like Frindle. We decide that something's a word, something becomes a word. So potentiality, now a word, even if it wasn't a word before. Which I don't know if it was. But anyway, we're creating the potentialities for language, the potentialities for communication. Right? What can we do? The creative capacity of language. What can we do? What are the very limits of what we can say? Yeah. So it's 11 o'clock. It's not super late, but I haven't eaten yet, and I'm kind of hungry. And I'm kind of tired. So I just want to thank you for joining. It's been a lovely, lovely time. We read some absolutely just awesome texts. I played so many games of Sudoku. And I gave up on a few of them. And I had, a little bit of help with others. But, I think I did all right. I think I did all right. 'Cause it's not about winning. It's about fun. Don't make me sing the SpongeBob song, because I will. And it'll be stuck in my head. And every time I come back, I will be singing it, and you won't like that. But anyway, we had a wonderful time. I did. I hope you did. And I, no, I don't know. But maybe I do know. I do know. I know the general ballpark of where I'm going. I just haven't charted out the course yet. But I think these chapters really struck a chord with me and really were really interesting. And oops, it's making noise again. And I hope that you will join me for our next reading Rainbow, but like gayer, next Wednesday. We do these every Wednesday until the end of the semester. And then next semester we might have a new one. I don't know. Because I know at some point I'm actually going to get into the writing process of the MA project. And I'm still going to be recording videos, but I don't know if I'm going to be taking classes. So it's like, I'm not sure. But um, you know, I hope there are many, many more of these to go, because I feel like I always come away from reading these papers and articles and whatever we are assigned, with something interesting, something useful. I mean, if not always something useful, something interesting. And that's really great. And so I really love being able to share them with people who might not otherwise have access to them. And so, yeah, thank you for joining me. I will see you next on Friday, 4 or 5 o'clock. I don't know what we're going to be playing, but it's going to be good. It's going to be good. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.